Hello everyone, welcome to Midnight Story Channel. I'm here to help you today. I know many of you listen to these stories to help you drift off to sleep, and I'm honored to be part of your journey. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching now? Take a deep breath, get comfortable, and allow yourself to relax. Your story is about to begin. Story 1. The night sky erupted, turning pitch black into a dazzling, terrifying display of lightning. In that earth-shattering moment, Amelia, couldn't have imagined that nature's violent light show would be the prelude to a nightmare that would haunt me for years to come. I was driving home from my mom's place, utterly exhausted after a long day of helping her move furniture and pack countless boxes. My precious daughter, Lily, was fast asleep in the back seat, her favorite stuffed rabbit clutched tightly to her small chest. The drive should have taken about 2 hours, a routine journey. But as the storm intensified with ferocious speed, I knew we were in for a much longer, far more terrifying night. The rain came down in relentless sheets, so heavy that even with the wipers on full speed, I could barely see 10 feet in front of the car. The road, a winding, treacherous stretch of asphalt cutting through dense, ancient forest, became a white-knuckle ordeal. Every blinding flash of lightning illuminated the trees, creating eerie, twisted shadows that seemed to writhe and reach for us, clawing at the car. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, my knuckles white with tension, my hands aching. We were still about an hour from home, and the storm showed no signs of letting up. I considered pulling over, waiting it out. But the thought of sitting vulnerable and exposed on the side of this deserted road in this raging storm made me profoundly uneasy. That's when it happened. A deafening crack of thunder startled me. So loud it made the car shudder, and in that split second of distraction, the car hit a slick, unseen patch of road. I felt the wheels lose traction, a terrifying, weightless slide, and suddenly we were spinning out of control. Everything moved in agonizing slow motion. I saw the massive trees rushing towards us, heard Lily's startled, terrified cry as she jolted awake, felt the sickening lurch as the car left the road entirely. Then, with a bone-jarring impact that ripped through the very frame of the vehicle, we came to an abrupt, violent stop. For a moment, all I could hear was the relentless pounding of rain on the roof and my own ragged, desperate breathing echoing in the ringing silence. Then, Lily's soft whimpers broke through the daze. "Mommy? What happened?" she whispered, her voice small and trembling. I twisted in my seat, ignoring the sharp, searing pain in my neck and shoulder. "It's okay, baby," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, steady for her sake, despite the terror gripping me. "We just had a little accident. Are you hurt?" She shook her head, her eyes wide with a profound fear that mirrored my own. I breathed a shaky sigh of relief, then turned my full attention to our terrifying situation. The car had slid partway down a steep embankment, coming to rest at an awkward, precarious angle against a large, unyielding tree. When I tried to start the engine, it sputtered weakly, a dying groan, before falling completely silent. My heart sank, a leaden weight in my chest. We were stuck, in the middle of nowhere, in a raging, relentless storm. I reached for my phone, my last desperate hope, praying we'd have signal, but the screen remained stubbornly, mockingly blank. "No service." "Okay," I said, trying to inject a confidence I didn't feel into my voice for Lily's sake. "We're going to be fine. Someone will come along soon, and we'll get help." But as the minutes ticked by, turning into an agonizing hour, then no one came. The rain continued its relentless, drumming assault, and the temperature in the car began to drop, slowly, chillingly. Lily had crawled into the front seat with me, and I held her close, trying to share what little warmth I could, trying to protect her from the cold and from the growing terror. Just when I was starting to lose hope, a cold, suffocating despair, I saw it, a pair of headlights, distant but unmistakable, cutting through the profound gloom. Relief, so intense it was almost painful, washed over me as I saw a truck slow down and pull over, its dark silhouette a sudden, welcome presence. A figure emerged from the vehicle, hunched against the torrential rain as they approached our wrecked car. I rolled down the window a crack. "You folks all right?" a deep voice called out, gruff but, at first, not unfriendly. In the flashes of lightning, I could make out a man's face under the brim of a baseball cap. "We've had an accident," I replied, my voice shaking with cold and lingering adrenaline. "Our car won't start. Do you have a phone we could use to call for help?" The man shook his head, a dismissive gesture. "No service out here, ma'am, but I can give you a ride to the nearest town. It's about 20 miles up the road." I hesitated. Every instinct, every cautionary tale screamed at me not to trust a stranger, especially not in these dire, isolated circumstances. But what choice did we have? We couldn't stay here all night. That would be unthinkable. "That would be great, thank you," I said, trying desperately to sound more confident than I felt. The man nodded. "All right then, grab what you need and come on over to my truck. We'll get you folks sorted out." I gathered our jackets and Lily's precious rabbit, then helped her out of the car. The rain soaked us instantly as we made our slow, painful way up the embankment. The man was waiting by his truck, the passenger door already open, inviting and ominous. As we got closer, something made me pause, a prickling sensation of profound wrongness. There was something off about his expression, a subtle glint in his eye that sent an icy chill down my spine. "Actually," I said, pulling Lily protectively closer to me, "maybe we should wait for the police. I'm sure someone will come looking for us soon." The man's demeanor changed instantly, like a mask dropping away. The friendly facade shattered, replaced by something hard, dangerous, and utterly menacing. "That wasn't really a request," he said, his voice low and guttural, devoid of any pretense of kindness. My blood ran cold as I saw him reach into his jacket. The chilling glint of metal caught my eye, a knife, its blade catching the dim, intermittent light from the truck interior. "Get in the truck," he ordered, his voice a low snarl. "Both of you. Now." Lily whimpered, pressing herself desperately against my side, trembling uncontrollably. My mind raced, a frantic vortex of fear and desperate thoughts, trying to think of any way out of this deepening nightmare. We were alone, unarmed, with nowhere to run in this brutal storm. "Please," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, raw with terror. "We don't want any trouble. Just let us go." He laughed, a harsh, humorless sound that was almost immediately drowned out by another deafening crack of thunder. "Oh, you're in trouble, all right. Now get in the damn truck before I lose my patience." I looked down at Lily, her eyes wide with uncomprehending terror, then back at the man with the glinting knife. In that agonizing moment, I knew I had to do something, anything, to protect my daughter. With a sudden, desperate surge of adrenaline, I shoved Lily behind me and lunged at the man. The move caught him completely off guard, and we both went down hard in the thick, churning mud. I heard Lily scream, a small, piercing sound as we grappled, the knife just inches from my face. Rain and mud made everything slippery, chaotic, and somehow, by a miracle of desperate strength, I managed to knock the knife from his hand, sending it skittering into the darkness. But he was stronger, far stronger than me, and soon he had me pinned, his hands closing around my throat, a suffocating vice. As my vision started to darken, the edges of consciousness fraying, I heard a dull, heavy thud. And suddenly the crushing pressure was gone. I gasped for air, rolling to my side, coughing. Through the rain and the pain, I saw Lily standing there, a large, gnarled branch clutched tightly in her small hands. She had hit him from behind, a small, valiant blow giving me the precious chance I needed. I scrambled to my feet, grabbing Lily's hand. "Run!" I shouted, and we took off, blindly, desperately, into the deeper woods. The undergrowth tore at our clothes, ripping and scratching as we ran wildly through the darkness. Behind us, I could hear the man cursing, a guttural roar of rage. The sounds of his renewed pursuit spurring us on despite our utter exhaustion, despite the searing pain. We ran until my lungs burned with fire and Lily was sobbing with every breath, her small body shaking uncontrollably. Finally, I spotted a hollow beneath a massive fallen tree. It wasn't much, but it was the only hiding spot available. I pulled Lily into the small, damp space, covering her mouth gently with my hand to muffle her desperate cries. We huddled there, shivering violently and utterly terrified, as the sound of footsteps grew closer, crunching through the leaves. "You can't hide forever," the man's voice rang out, unnervingly close, echoing through the trees. "I'll find you. And when I do." His chilling threat was abruptly cut off by a new sound, sirens, growing louder by the second. Someone must have reported our abandoned car. The man swore loudly, a frustrated, guttural sound, and I heard his footsteps retreating rapidly, fading into the storm last night. Still, we didn't move, too afraid, too traumatized that it might be a trick, another cruel trap. It wasn't until we heard voices calling out our names, flashlight beams cutting through the trees like searching eyes, that I finally allowed myself to hope. "Here," I shouted, my voice hoarse, raw. "We're over here." The next few hours passed in a blur of flashing lights and comforting voices. Police officers and paramedics swarmed the area. Lily and I were wrapped in warm blankets, checked meticulously for injuries, and questioned extensively about what had happened. They found the man's truck abandoned further up the road, but no sign of him. The knife was recovered from where it had fallen in our struggle, providing some crucial evidence to corroborate our harrowing story. As we sat in the back of an ambulance, Lily curled up against my side, her small hand clutching mine, I couldn't stop shaking. The chilling realization of how close we had come to a far worse fate hit me like a physical blow, leaving me breathless. "You saved us," I whispered to Lily, stroking her damp hair, my voice thick with emotion. "You were so brave." She looked up at me, her eyes still wide but no longer filled with paralyzing terror. "We saved each other, Mommy," she said softly. In that profound moment, despite everything we had been through, I felt a fierce surge of pride and boundless love. We had faced the unthinkable, confronted pure evil, and survived. Not just because of luck, but because we had fought for each other, fiercely and relentlessly. The road ahead would be long, I knew. There would be nightmares, therapy sessions, and a long, arduous journey to feeling safe again. But we were alive, and we were together. Whatever came next, we would face it as we had faced that stormy night, side by side, drawing strength from each other. As the ambulance pulled away, taking us to the hospital for a thorough checkup, I held Lily close. The storm was finally beginning to subside, the first hesitant hints of dawn peeking through the bruised, gray clouds. It was a new day, and we had survived to see it. The memory of that night would stay with us forever, a stark reminder of the darkness that can lurk unexpectedly in the world. But it would also serve as a powerful testament to our resilience, our unwavering love, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her child. In the face of true terror, we had discovered a profound strength we never knew we possessed. And that, I realized, was a light no storm could ever extinguish. Story 2. The dusty key slid into the lock with a satisfying click. And as I, Julian, pushed open the heavy oak door, I had no idea I was stepping into a mystery that would consume my life and nearly end it. I'd always been fascinated by old houses, their history, the silent stories held within their crumbling walls. So when I stumbled upon the listing for Blackwood Manor, a sprawling Victorian on the outskirts of town that had reportedly been abandoned for decades, I couldn't resist. The price was surprisingly low, almost suspiciously so, and the real estate agent seemed almost too eager to close the deal. I should have known then that something was profoundly off, but my excitement, a potent cocktail of curiosity and ambition, blinded me to the glaring red flags. The house was everything I dreamed of and more: soaring high ceilings, intricate, hand-carved woodwork, a grand staircase that swept majestically up to the second floor. Yes, It needed work, a tremendous amount of work, but I could see the undeniable potential beneath the layers of dust and decades of neglect. I spent that first day simply exploring, meticulously mapping out renovation plans in my head, already envisioning its glorious restoration. It wasn't until I reached the attic that things took a truly strange and unsettling turn. The space was cluttered with old, forgotten furniture and boxes, typical attic fare. But tucked away in a far corner, partially hidden by a grimy, forgotten sheet, I found something entirely unexpected, a door. It was smaller than a regular door, perhaps 4 feet high, and seemed utterly out of place in the slanted attic wall. Curious, my heart quickening, I tried the ornate handle, but it was locked. I made a mental note to ask the real estate agent about it later. As I turned to leave, something else caught my eye, a faint glint of tarnished metal peeking out from under an old, heavy trunk. I moved the trunk aside and found a small key, intricately ornate and blackened with age. On a whim, I tried it in the little door's lock. To my utter surprise, it fit perfectly. The door opened with a groan, revealing a small, dark, suffocating room beyond. I fumbled for my phone, its flashlight beam cutting a shaky path through the impenetrable darkness, trying to illuminate the space. What I saw made my breath catch in my throat, a gasp of disbelief and growing terror. The walls were completely covered in photographs, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Yellowed with age, curling at the edges, they showed people, men, women, children, all in various poses and settings, their faces frozen in time. But something about them felt profoundly off. The expressions were too stiff, the eyes too vacant, unsettlingly empty. And in every single photo, barely noticeable unless you were actively looking for it, was a shadowy, indistinct figure lurking subtly in the background. I stepped closer, my heart pounding, examining the photos with a morbid fascination. The shadowy figure was always there. Sometimes just a hint of a silhouette, a fleeting glimpse, sometimes clearer, a tall, thin shape with unnaturally long, spindly limbs. In some of the photos, it seemed to be reaching, its elongated, claw-like fingers poised, almost touching the subjects. A profound chill ran down my spine. This had to be some kind of elaborate hoax, right? A previous owner's weird art project, a macabre joke? But as I looked closer at the newer-looking photos, a fresh wave of dread washed over me. I recognized some of the settings. They were places around town. The local park, the old library, even the street outside this very house. I was so utterly engrossed in the photographs, my mind reeling, that I didn't hear the attic door close. It wasn't until I turned to leave that I realized with a jolt of pure panic that I was locked in. Panic surged, raw and animalistic, as I pounded frantically on the door, calling for help, even though I knew with terrifying certainty that no one else was in the house. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only minutes, the door suddenly, eerily swung open. I nearly fell out of the little room, my heart racing, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The attic was empty, just as I'd left it. But something felt profoundly different. The air was heavier, colder. And I couldn't shake the chilling feeling that I was being watched. I fled downstairs, desperate to convince myself that I just accidentally locked myself in. But deep down, a cold certainty told me that wasn't the case. Over the next few weeks, as I worked diligently on renovating the house, strange, unsettling things kept happening. I'd wake up to find furniture mysteriously rearranged, or doors I'd sworn I'd closed and locked now standing wide open. Sometimes, I'd catch a fleeting glimpse of movement out of the corner of my eye, only to turn and find nothing there, just empty space. But the most unsettling thing, the thing that truly broke through my last defenses of rational thought, was the photographs. New ones kept appearing in that little room in the attic, photos I knew hadn't been there before. And they were of me. Me sleeping. Me working on the house. Me walking down the street. Always with that shadowy figure lurking in the background, growing closer each time. I became obsessed with uncovering the truth behind the photos and the house's sinister history. I spent countless hours at the local library digging through old newspapers and dusty town records. What I found chilled me to the bone. The house had a dark, unspeakable past. Over the decades, dozens of people who had lived there had simply disappeared without a trace. The disappearances were always brushed off, dismissed by the authorities. People assumed they'd moved away without telling anyone or simply run off to start a new life. But I knew better. I started seeing chilling connections everywhere. The shadowy figure in the photos matched fragmented descriptions in local legends of an entity called the Watcher. People claimed it stalked its victims, growing stronger as it fed on their fear, before finally taking them into its abyssal embrace. I knew how it sounded. I knew that if I told anyone at all, they'd think I was completely insane, delusional. But I couldn't deny what was happening. The Watcher was real, terrifyingly real, and it was after me. I tried to leave, to sell the house and run, to escape its insidious grasp. But something always stopped me. My car would mysteriously break down, its engine sputtering to an inexplicable halt, or sudden violent storms would make the roads utterly impassable. It was as if the house itself was a living entity actively keeping me there, a prisoner within its ancient walls. Then came the night that nearly broke me. I woke up to the soft, rhythmic clicking sound of my old film camera, the vintage camera I'd found in the attic and had been meaning to get rid of. In the dim, moonlit room, I saw it floating in midair, slowly turning, its lens pointing directly at me. And behind it, barely visible, a shimmering distortion in the air, was the shadowy figure from the photos. The Watcher. I screamed a raw, primal sound ripped from my throat and scrambled out of bed, locking myself in the bathroom. I stayed there until dawn, shaking uncontrollably and sobbing, consumed by a paralyzing fear. When I finally gathered the terrifying courage to come out, I found a newly developed photo lying on my bed. It showed me sleeping, utterly vulnerable, and the Watcher's elongated, claw-like hand reaching for my face, closer than ever before, almost touching. I knew then that I was running out of precious time. I had to find a way to stop this thing, to break whatever insidious hold it had on the house, and on me. My desperate research had turned up whispers of a forgotten ritual, a perilous way to banish the Watcher. It was dangerous, incredibly risky, and there was absolutely no guarantee it would work, but I was out of options. I spent the next week preparing, gathering the archaic items I needed, and steeling my shattered nerves. On the night of the full moon, I stood in the exact center of the attic. Surrounded by flickering candles and ancient symbols I'd painstakingly drawn on the dusty floor. The little room's ominous door stood open, the hundreds of photographs seeming to watch me with malevolent, waiting intent. As I began the ritual, chanting words in a language I didn't understand, a language that felt ancient and wrong on my tongue, the house came violently alive around me. Wind howled through the empty halls, doors slammed open and shut with deafening force, and I could hear chilling whispers coming from the very walls themselves. The shadowy figure appeared, more solid, more terrifying than I'd ever seen it. Its face a void of pure darkness, its spectral arms reaching for me with those terrifying, elongated fingers. I wanted to run, every instinct screaming at me to flee, to abandon all hope, but I forced myself to stand my ground. Unyielding, I was the last line of defense. If I failed, this thing would keep taking victims for who knows how long. Just when I thought I couldn't take any more, when the Watcher was so close I could feel the bone-chilling cold emanating from its form, there was a blinding flash of incandescent light. The thing shrieked, an inhuman, soul-shattering sound that made my ears ring, and then suddenly it was gone. The house fell silent, an abrupt, profound silence. The oppressive, suffocating atmosphere that had hung over everything lifted, leaving behind a pervasive sense of peace I hadn't felt since I first stepped foot in Blackwood Manor. In the little room, I found the photographs crumbling to dust, their malevolent power gone. I'd like to say that was the end of it, that I moved on and everything went back to normal. But the truth is, you don't go through something like that without it irrevocably changing you. I still live in the house. I couldn't bear to let someone else move in, unaware of its grim history. But I've turned it into a sanctuary of sorts, a place for people who've experienced things that defy explanation, who seek understanding for the unexplainable. Sometimes, late at night, I think I catch a fleeting glimpse of a shadow out of the corner of my eye, but I'm not afraid anymore. I faced the darkness and came out the other side. Whatever's out there, whatever's lurking in the shadows of old houses and hidden rooms, I'll be ready for it. The Watcher taught me that the world is stranger and more dangerous than we like to believe. But it also showed me that we're stronger than we know. Sometimes all it takes to banish the monsters is the courage to stand our ground and face them head-on. As for the camera that started it all, it sits on my mantelpiece, a silent, powerful reminder of what I've been through and what I've overcome. I keep it there, not out of fear, but as a testament to the fact that sometimes the most terrifying things can be captured in a single frame, and that with bravery and unwavering determination, even the darkest shadows can be brought into the light. Story 3. The joyful clamor of children's laughter filled the summer air. A vibrant sound that nevertheless struck a discordant note against the sudden chill that snaked down my spine. There, amidst the cheerful chaos of the 4th of July park, I spotted him. A lone man with a camera. His lens pointed not at the spinning carousel or the sweet-smelling cotton candy stands, but disturbingly at the playground. In that unnerving moment, Clara, a veteran social worker, had no premonition that my professional instinct to intervene would plunge me into a waking nightmare that would haunt me for years. The local park was a festive tableau, bustling with activity. Families sprawled on picnic blankets, the smoky aroma of barbecue mingling with the sugary scent of funnel cakes and popcorn. It was supposed to be a rare, carefree day off, a chance to unwind with my sister, Mia, and her kids. But years spent working with vulnerable children had sharpened my senses to a painful degree, turning me into a human alarm system for potential threats. Initially, I tried to dismiss my unease. Perhaps he's just a proud parent, I rationalized, capturing family memories. Yet, as I subtly observed him moving from one cluster of children to another, always maintaining a careful distance, always alone, never engaging with any family, my gut twisted with growing discomfort. His camera was a professional-grade model, far too sophisticated and expensive for casual holiday snapshots. I nudged Mia, keeping my voice low. "Hey, do you see that guy over there? The one with the camera?" Her brow furrowed as she followed my gaze. "Yeah, what about him?" she whispered. "I don't know," I admitted, a tremor in my voice. "Something just feels off. He's been photographing kids for the past half hour, and I haven't seen him with any family." Mia's eyes widened slightly. "You don't think?" I nodded grimly, a cold certainty settling in. "I'm going to speak with him. Can you watch the kids?" She grabbed my arm, her grip tight, a silent plea. "Be careful, Clara. What if he's dangerous?" I offered what I hoped was a reassuring smile, though my heart was beginning to thump uncomfortably. "I deal with all sorts of people at work, remember? I'll be fine. Just maybe have your phone ready, just in case." As I approached him, I consciously projected an air of casual friendliness, a non-threatening openness. He was a middle-aged man, unremarkable in appearance, dressed in khakis and a polo shirt, the epitome of an everyday neighbor or colleague. "Beautiful day for photos, isn't it?" I began, standing beside him, my voice light. He flinched slightly, lowering his camera quickly as if caught. Yes it is," he mumbled. "You must be getting some excellent shots of your children," I probed, watching his reaction closely. A flicker of something, panic, perhaps, or anger crossed his face before he managed to smooth it into a strained smile. "No kids of my own," he said, a little too quickly, a little too defensive. "I'm a freelance photographer, just capturing the holiday spirit, you know? Alarm bells now clanged loudly in my head. "Oh," I said, drawing out the word deliberately. "And for whom do you freelance?" He hesitated. A fraction too long. A tiny tell. Various local publications. Nothing you'd likely have heard of. Probably. I decided to press harder to make my intentions clear. "You know, as a parent myself, I'd be a little uncomfortable with a stranger taking pictures of my children without permission. Perhaps you should stick to the decorations and food stands." His demeanor shifted instantly, the friendly facade crumbling to reveal something cold and hard. "Listen, lady," he snarled, his voice low and dangerous. "I don't know who you think you are, but this is a public park. I have every right to be here and take pictures of whatever I want." I held my ground, despite my racing heart. "Actually, you don't. Not of minors without parental consent. I'm going to have to ask you to leave or I'll call the police." For a moment, I thought he might back down. But then his hand shot out, grabbing my wrist with bruising force. "You're not calling anyone," he hissed. What happened next was a blur of motion and raw adrenaline. I twisted, breaking his grip using a self-defense move I'd learned years ago. He lunged, his camera swinging wildly like a weapon. I ducked, feeling the whoosh of air as it narrowly missed my head. People were beginning to notice now. I heard shouts, the rising screams of frightened children as the scene unfolded. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Mia clutching her phone, undoubtedly dialing 911. The man must have realized he was drawing too much attention. He turned to run, but I couldn't let him escape, not when I was so terrifyingly sure my suspicions were correct. I tackled him from behind, sending us both crashing to the ground. We grappled in the dirt, him struggling to break free, me desperately clinging on until help arrived. He was stronger, but my fury, born from years of witnessing the suffering of children at the hands of predators, gave me a desperate strength. Finally, I heard the blessed wail of police sirens. The man redoubled his efforts, landing a solid punch to my ribs that left me gasping, but it was too late for him. Strong hands pulled him off me, and I looked up to see two officers wrestling him into handcuffs. As I sat up, wincing from the pain in my side, I saw his camera lying in the grass where it had fallen. The screen was cracked, but still on. What I saw there sent a sickening chill through me. Not just photos from the park, but darker, far more sinister images. Children in various states of undress, in poses no child should ever be in. My stomach churned and I had to look away. The next few hours passed in a daze of police statements and medical checks. The man, it turned out, was wanted in 3 states for the production and distribution of child pornography. My instincts had been horrifyingly correct. My actions had likely saved countless children. But as the adrenaline wore off and the full reality sank in, I found myself shaking uncontrollably. Mia hugged me tightly, tears in her eyes. "You could have been killed," she whispered. "But I wasn't," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. And neither was anyone else. In the days and weeks that followed, I was hailed as a hero. Local news stations sought interviews, grateful parents from the park reached out. But the darkness of what I'd seen, the knowledge of that man's depravity, haunted me. I threw myself into my work with renewed vigor, determined to do more, to protect vulnerable children. I advocated for stronger laws, for better resources for law enforcement to catch these monsters. Still, at night, I was plagued by nightmares of the struggle, the camera's images, and all the children I couldn't save. It took time and therapy, but eventually I learned to live with what happened. I couldn't unsee what I'd witnessed, couldn't unknow the darkness in some hearts. But I could use that experience to make a profound difference. Years later, I still visit that park on the 4th of July. I watch the children play, listen to their laughter, and feel a bittersweet mix of joy and vigilance. The world can be dangerous, but it's also full of beauty and innocence worth protecting. Sometimes I still scan the crowd, looking for lone figures with cameras. Old habits die hard, I suppose. But now, instead of fear, I feel a quiet determination. Because I know that for every predator, there are people like me. Willing to stand up, to intervene, to protect those who cannot protect themselves. The man with the camera taught me a harsh lesson about the world's brutal realities. But he also revealed the immense power of trusting one's gut. He showed me the strength found in acting, even when utterly terrifying. A single individual can spark change. One act of courage can transform lives. As fireworks explode overhead, painting the sky with fiery bursts of red, white, and blue, I quietly reaffirm my commitment to embody that courage. For true freedom ultimately means more than simply celebrating a nation, it means fiercely safeguarding its most vulnerable. The 4th of July now forever holds a duality of emotions for me. A stark reminder of a harrowing encounter, yet also a testament to the profound resilience I discovered within. And the certainty that ordinary people can indeed become the heroes our world so desperately needs. Story 4. The drizzle had been relentless for hours, painting the winding country roads a slick, treacherous black. As a seasoned truck driver, I, Marcus, usually stuck to the main highways, but a last-minute detour had me navigating these desolate backroads. That's when I saw him, a lone figure silhouetted against the deepening twilight, his thumb extended in the universal sign of distress. Against my better judgment, I slowed my rig. A momentary lapse in my usual caution and the kind of decision that, in hindsight, changes everything. The wipers on my 18-wheeler fought a losing battle against the downpour as I pulled onto the muddy shoulder. The man, a gaunt figure in his late 30s with rain-soaked, shaggy hair, jogged up to my passenger side window. I cracked it open, the rain-streaked glass distorting his features. "Where are you headed, friend?" I rumbled, trying to get a clearer look at him. "Just up the road a bit," he replied, a grateful smile flashing across his face. "Maybe the next town if it's no trouble." I hesitated, then reached over and unlatched the door. "Hop in," I conceded. He slid into the cab, bringing with him the smell of wet clothes and something else, something I couldn't quite place. As I pulled the massive truck back onto the empty highway, I snuck a glance at my new passenger. His clothes were worn but appeared clean, and a small, nondescript backpack rested at his feet. "Thanks for stopping," he said, rubbing his hands together. I was starting to think I'd be out there all night. "No problem," I replied, keeping my eyes on the road ahead. "I'm Marcus, by the way." "Nice to meet you, Marcus." "I'm Alex." We fell into an easy conversation as the miles melted away. Alex told me he was a freelance writer, wandering the country and picking up odd jobs. I shared a bit about my own life, the long hauls, the endless stretch of road, and a recent rough patch that had me taking this impromptu cross-country trip to clear my head. As we talked, my initial unease began to fade. Alex was charming, quick-witted, with a laid-back demeanor that put me at ease. Maybe picking him up wasn't such a bad idea after all. About an hour into our drive, the rain finally gave way. The clouds parted, revealing a sky ablaze with stars and a bright, full moon. The highway stretched out before us, empty and silent. "Mind if I put on some music?" I asked, reaching for the radio. "Actually," Alex said, his voice suddenly different, flat. I glanced at him, startled by the change in his tone. The moonlight cast strange, sharp shadows across his face, and for a fleeting moment, he looked utterly alien. A completely different person. "Oh," I managed, trying to keep my voice steady. "Okay, sure." An uncomfortable silence descended, thick and heavy within the truck's cab. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my earlier ease evaporating. Something had shifted profoundly, but I couldn't put my finger on what. So, I said, desperate to break the tension, "How much further were you planning to go, Alex?" Alex didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was a low, chilling whisper. "Why don't we just keep driving for a while?" A cold dread snaked its way down my spine. I forced a laugh, trying to sound casual. "Well, I do need to stop for gas soon. There should be a station coming up in the next town." "No." The word came out sharp, almost angry. No stops. Just keep driving. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. I risked another look at Alex and found him staring at me intently. All traces of his earlier warmth gone, replaced by a cold, calculating gaze. "Look," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I think maybe it's time I dropped you off. There's a rest stop a few miles ahead." Before I could finish, Alex's hand shot out, grabbing my wrist. His grip was like iron, his fingers digging into my skin. I said, "Keep driving." He growled, no longer bothering to hide the menace in his voice. Panic surged through me. I yanked my arm away, swerving slightly on the empty road. What the hell? Let go of me. Alex's other hand disappeared into his jacket, and when it re-emerged, my blood ran cold. The moonlight glinted off the wicked blade of a knife, its sharp edge pointed directly at me. "Now, Marcus," he said, his voice eerily calm. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to keep driving exactly where I tell you to. If you try anything stupid, if you speed up, slow down, or even think about stopping, I'll have no choice but to use this. Do you understand?" I nodded, too terrified to speak. My mind raced, desperately trying to figure a way out of this nightmare. The highway stretched endlessly before us, dark and deserted. There were no other cars, no signs of life, just me, Alex, and miles of empty road. "Good," Alex continued, settling back in his seat, but keeping the knife trained on me. "Take the next exit." I did as he said, my hands shaking as I guided the truck off the highway. The exit led to a narrow country road, lined on both sides by dense forest. The trees loomed over us, their branches reaching out like gnarled fingers in the moonlight. As we drove deeper into the woods, Alex began to talk again. But this time his words sent ice through my veins. "You know, Marcus," he said, almost conversationally, "you really shouldn't pick up strangers. Didn't your parents ever teach you that? It's dangerous out here. You never know who might be waiting on the side of the road." I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice from trembling. "Please," I whispered. "Just take my truck, my money, whatever you want. Just let me go." Alex laughed, a chilling sound that echoed in the confined space of the cab. "Oh, Marcus, it's not your money I'm after. You see, I've been waiting for someone like you. Someone kind, trusting, alone." Tears burned in my eyes as the full horror of my situation sank in. I thought about my family. My friends, would they even know what had happened to me? Would anyone ever find me out here in the middle of nowhere? We drove on in silence for what felt like hours, the trees pressing in closer with each passing mile. Finally, Alex directed me onto a dirt road barely wide enough for the truck. Branches scraped against the windows as we bumped along, heading deeper into the forest. "Stop here," Alex commanded suddenly. I brought the truck to a halt in a small clearing. The headlights illuminated a dilapidated cabin, its windows dark and empty. My heart sank as I realized this must be our final destination. "Turn off the engine," Alex said, his knife never wavering. I complied, my hands shaking so badly I could barely manage the key. As soon as the engine died, the forest seemed to press in around us, the silence overwhelming. "Now, Marcus," Alex said, his voice low and menacing, "we're going to get out of the truck. You're going to walk in front of me, nice and slow, towards the cabin. If you try to run, if you scream, if you do anything I don't like, well, I think you know what will happen." I nodded, unable to speak past the lump of fear in my throat. Slowly, I opened my door and stepped out into the cool night air. Alex followed close behind, the tip of his knife pressing into my back as we approached the cabin. My mind raced. There had to be a way out of this, some way to escape, to get help. But with each step, hope slipped further away. Just as we reached the porch steps, a twig snapped in the darkness behind us. Alex whirled around, momentarily distracted. In that split second, instinct took over. I ran. I didn't think, didn't plan. I just bolted into the woods as fast as my legs would carry me. Branches whipped at my face and arms as I crashed through the underbrush, my lungs burning with each desperate breath. Behind me, I could hear Alex cursing, his heavy footsteps in pursuit. I pushed myself harder, ignoring the pain as thorns tore at my clothes and skin. I had no idea where I was going, no plan beyond putting as much distance between myself and Alex as possible. The forest was a maze of shadows and moonlight, each tree indistinguishable from the next. Just when I thought my legs would give out, I broke through the tree line and found myself on the edge of a steep ravine. Far below, I could hear the rush of water, a river or stream hidden in the darkness. The sound of Alex crashing through the woods grew closer. I was trapped with nowhere left to run. In that moment, faced with the choice between the devil I knew and the unknown below, I made my decision. Taking a deep breath, I stepped off the edge of the ravine. The fall seemed to last forever and no time at all. I hit the water hard, the shock of the cold stealing my breath. The current immediately swept me away, tumbling me over and over in its icy grip. I fought my way to the surface, gasping for air. Above me, I could hear Alex's enraged shouts, growing fainter as the river carried me swiftly downstream. I don't know how long I was in the water, minutes or hours. It all blurred together in a haze of cold and fear. Eventually, the current slowed and I managed to drag myself onto a rocky bank. I lay there for a long time, shivering and exhausted, hardly daring to believe I had escaped. As the sky began to lighten with the first hints of dawn, I slowly got to my feet and began the long walk towards salvation. It took hours of stumbling through the woods before I finally found a road. A kind, elderly couple picked me up, alarmed by my bedraggled appearance, and drove me to the nearest police station. The authorities searched the area where I'd left my truck but found no trace of Alex or the cabin. It was as if they had vanished into thin air, leaving me to question if it had all been some terrible nightmare. But I know the truth. I know the evil that waits on lonely highways, wearing a friendly face and a disarming smile. And I know that sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones we invite into our lives with a simple act of kindness. I never pick up hitchhikers anymore. Story 5. The scratches on the cabin window initially seemed like harmless imperfections, simply signs of age on a rustic retreat. Just old damage, I thought, trying to dismiss them. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, bleeding long shadows across the living room, those faint marks began to twist, morphing from random scrapes into something disturbingly deliberate, symbols, almost. That's when the chilling realization truly set in. This peaceful getaway I'd so eagerly anticipated might very well become my most terrifying nightmare. I, Clara, had been looking forward to this weekend for months. The relentless grind of city life, a soul-draining job, and a recent, messy breakup had left me utterly desperate for solitude. When I stumbled across the listing for a secluded cabin rental, it felt like the universe was offering a perfect escape. The drive out had been long but surprisingly therapeutic. As my small sedan wound its way up narrow mountain roads, the suffocating weight of my daily worries seemed to fall away with each passing mile. By the time I pulled up to the cabin, nestled in a small clearing surrounded by towering pines, I felt lighter than I had in years. The cabin's owner, an older, gruff but friendly man named George, met me with the keys. He gave me a quick, no-nonsense tour before heading back down the mountain. Cell service is spotty up here, he'd warned as he left, but there's a landline inside if you need anything. Enjoy the peace and quiet. And quiet it was. As I unpacked my bags and settled in, I reveled in the absolute silence. No blaring car horns, no chattering neighbors, no incessant ping of notifications from my phone, just the occasional rustle of wind through the ancient trees. I spent that first afternoon hiking the winding trails around the property, breathing in the crisp mountain air and feeling my tense muscles slowly unwind with each step. By the time I returned to the cabin, the sun was just beginning to set, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and purple. That's when I noticed the scratches. They were subtle at first glance, thin, almost imperceptible lines etched into the glass of the large living room window. I ran my fingers over them, feeling the slight grooves beneath my fingertips, probably just wear and tear. I told myself, trying to be rational, this place is old after all. But as the light outside faded, casting the room in a soft, eerie golden glow, the scratches seemed to take on a different, more unsettling quality. What had initially looked like random marks now appeared almost deliberate, purposeful. I leaned in closer, squinting at the glass. There, hidden among the chaotic web of lines, I could distinctly make out shapes. A perfect circle here, a jagged, lightning-like line there. And was that an eye staring back at me from the glass itself? A cold shiver, unrelated to the mountain air, ran down my spine. I shook my head, forcing a shaky laugh. My imagination was clearly working overtime, fueled by isolation and an overactive mind. I needed food and rest. I busied myself with making dinner, pushing the unsettling markings to the back of my mind. The kitchen was well stocked, and soon the cabin filled with the comforting aroma of simmering pasta sauce and garlic bread. As I sat down to eat, however, I couldn't help but glance back at the window. In the fading light, the scratches seemed even more pronounced, casting long, eerie shadows across the wooden floorboards. "Stop it," I chided myself aloud. "You came here to relax, Clara, not to spook yourself with ghost stories." After dinner, I curled up on the couch with a paperback novel, determined to enjoy my evening. But I couldn't focus on the words on the page. My eyes kept drifting, drawn irresistibly to the window, tracing the outlines of those strange symbols. The more I looked, the more utterly convinced I became that they weren't random at all. There was a discernible pattern there, a deliberate arrangement that sent a fresh shiver through me. When the last of the daylight finally faded, leaving the room bathed in oppressive shadows, I couldn't take it anymore. I got up and, with a decisive tug, drew the heavy curtains blocking out the unsettling view. With the windows now covered, some of the tension began to leave my body. I was being ridiculous, I told myself. Tomorrow, in the clear, rational light of day, I'd see that it was all just my overactive imagination playing tricks. I went through my nighttime routine, brushing my teeth and changing into pajamas. As I climbed into bed, the absolute silence of the cabin pressed in around me. It was almost too quiet, a heavy, expectant silence. Sleep came fitfully, plagued by half-formed nightmares of eyes watching me from the oppressive darkness. At one point, I jolted awake, heart pounding, convinced I'd heard something moving outside. I lay there, straining my ears, but heard nothing but the faint whisper of wind through the trees. A sound that now seemed sinister rather than soothing. Just as I was about to drift off again, a new sound shattered the fragile peace. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps, crunching on the gravel outside the cabin. I froze, hardly daring to breathe. It had to be an animal, right? A deer. Maybe, or a raccoon foraging for food. But deep down, a primal certainty told me those weren't the sounds of an animal. Someone was out there. The footsteps circled the cabin slowly, pausing occasionally as if listening, gauging. I could track their unervingly precise progress. Past the front porch, around to the side of the house, then to the back. My heart raced, a frantic drum against my ribs as I realized they were now approaching my bedroom window. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing myself to wake up from this terrifying nightmare. The footsteps stopped just outside. For a long, agonizing moment, there was nothing but silence. Then a soft scraping sound, like someone or something dragging their nails across the glass. A choked whimper escaped my throat before I could stop it. I clapped a trembling hand over my mouth, terrified of making any noise. The scraping continued, slow and methodical. I could vividly picture those insidious symbols being carved into the window, mirroring the ones I'd seen in the living room, solidifying into the shape of a single malevolent eye. Suddenly, The landline phone on the bedside table rang, shattering the oppressive silence of the night. I nearly leapt out of my skin at the jarring sound. The scraping outside stopped abruptly. The phone continued to ring, shrill and insistent, an unwelcome lifeline. With a trembling hand, I reached out and picked up the receiver. "Hello," I whispered, my voice barely audible. For a moment, there was only static on the line, a crackling emptiness. Then a voice, low and raspy, barely more than a whisper itself. "I see you." The line went dead. I dropped the phone as if it had burned me, scrambling out of bed and pressing myself against the far wall. My eyes darted frantically around the room, searching for anything, a lamp, a heavy book, I could use as a weapon. The footsteps outside started up again, faster now. They moved back around to the front of the cabin. I had to get out of here, but how? My car keys were in the living room, and to get there, I'd have to pass by those windows, those eyes that I now knew were watching me. A chilling sound from the front of the cabin made my blood run cold, the slow, distinct creak of the porch steps. They were coming inside. Panic clouded my thoughts, a suffocating fog. I looked around wildly, spotting the small window in the bathroom attached to my room. It would be a tight squeeze. An almost impossible fit, but it was my only chance. I darted into the bathroom, locking the door behind me, even though I knew it wouldn't hold for long against whatever was out there. With shaking hands, I pushed up the window sash. The cool night air hit my face, sharp and invigorating, as I wiggled through the opening. It was an incredibly tight fit, but adrenaline, a powerful, raw surge, gave me strength I didn't know I possessed. Just as my feet hit the damp ground outside, I heard a loud crash from within the cabin. They were inside. I ran. I ran like I'd never run before in my life, my bare feet slapping against the cold earth. Branches whipped at my face and arms, leaving stinging welts. I had no idea where I was going. No destination in mind. My only thought was to put as much distance as humanly possible between myself and that horrifying cabin. Behind me, I could hear shouts, more than one voice now pursuing me through the stillness of the night. I pushed myself harder, ignoring the searing pain as sharp rocks and twigs cut into my feet. Ignoring the burning in my lungs. The forest was a disorienting maze of shadows and moonlight, each tree indistinguishable from the next. I ran until my lungs screamed for air, until my legs felt like lead. Finally, mercifully, I saw lights ahead, a road, a promise of escape. I burst out of the tree line just as a car was passing. I waved my arms frantically, screaming for help, my voice raw and hoarse. The car screeched to a halt and an older couple peered out at me in alarm. I must have looked utterly insane, barefoot, in pajamas, covered in scratches and leaves, a wild-eyed apparition in the darkness. "Please," I gasped, "please, help me. Someone's after me." They ushered me into the warmth of their car without hesitation. The woman wrapping a soft blanket around my shivering shoulders as her husband sped away, leaving the nightmare behind. At the police station, I told my harrowing story through chattering teeth, still shaking with fear and adrenaline. The officers looked skeptical, their faces a mask of professional doubt, but agreed to check out the cabin. They found nothing. No signs of intruders. No footprints, not even the scratches on the windows I'd so clearly seen. George, the owner, swore up and down that he'd been home all night and hadn't called me. I know what I saw, what I heard. The symbols, the footsteps, the voice on the phone. It was all real. But with no concrete evidence, I was left to question my own sanity. Had it all been some vivid hallucination, brought on by extreme stress and overwhelming isolation? I'll never know for sure, but one thing is absolutely certain. I'll never stay in a secluded cabin again. Some getaways, I've learned, are better left as daydreams, safely distant from the dark, insidious reality that can lurk unseen in the wilderness. Because sometimes the quiet isn't peaceful at all. Sometimes the quiet is just hiding something far more sinister, waiting patiently for the perfect moment to strike. Story 6. The moment I pulled up to the address, a cold knot formed in the pit of my stomach. The house stood there, a monolithic shadow against the bruised twilight, utterly dark and silent. But it was too late to turn back now. A sharp ping from my phone made me jump, a new message. Come inside. The door's open. That's when the dread truly solidified into a horrifying certainty. This wasn't just another delivery. This was the chilling, inescapable beginning of a nightmare. I'm Leo, and I've been a food delivery driver for about a year now. It's hardly glamorous work, but it pays the bills and, more importantly, gives me the flexibility to pursue my real passion. Composing music. Most nights are uneventful. Pick up the order, drop it off, rinse and repeat. But this particular night was different. It started like any other shift. I logged into the app, waiting for orders to come in, the digital chime a familiar comfort. The first few deliveries were routine, a family ordering pizza, a college student getting late-night Chinese food. Nothing out of the ordinary. Then, around 11 p.m., I got the ping for an order that would change everything. The destination was on the far outskirts of town, an area I wasn't too familiar with. As I drove, the streetlights grew fewer and farther between, the houses more spread out, swallowed by the encroaching darkness. I squinted at my phone's GPS, its blue line a tenuous guide, making sure I was heading in the right direction. Finally, I turned onto a narrow, unpaved road that seemed to lead nowhere, swallowed by an oppressive canopy of trees. Their branches, gnarled and skeletal, blocked out what little moonlight there was. My headlights cut through the inky blackness, illuminating a path that grew more overgrown, more desolate with each passing minute. Just as I was starting to think I'd made a wrong turn, I saw it. A mailbox, barely visible in the gloom, with the number that matched my delivery address. I pulled into the long, gravel driveway, the tires crunching loudly, the sound amplified in the suffocating silence. The house at the end of the drive was massive and old, with peeling paint that seemed to flake off like diseased skin and shuttered windows that stared out like empty eyes. No lights were on anywhere, and there didn't seem to be any cars around. A cold shiver ran down my spine as I put my car in park. This isn't unusual, I told myself, trying to quell the rising unease. Sometimes people order food late and fall asleep before it arrives. I'll just leave it on the porch and be on my way. I grabbed the insulated bag of food, a standard pizza order, ironically, and got out of the car. The overwhelming silence of the night pressing in around me as I approached the front porch. My phone buzzed, vibrating against my leg, a new message from the customer, come inside. The door's open. I hesitated. This went against every protocol, every common-sense rule I'd ever been taught as a delivery driver. Never enter a customer's house. Always leave the food outside if no one answers. But something, a strange, morbid curiosity, or perhaps just the lateness of the hour clouding my judgment, made me reach out and try the door handle. Whatever the reason, I turned the knob. The door creaked open, a slow, drawn-out groan, revealing a hallway beyond, shrouded in impenetrable darkness. "Hello," I called out, my voice sounding small and scared, even to my own ears. "Food delivery?" No answer. I should have left then. Should have dropped the food on the porch and run. But I didn't. Instead, I took a tentative step inside. "Hello?" I tried again. My voice a little louder this time. "I have your order. Is anyone home?" The floorboards groaned ominously under my feet as I ventured further into the house. The air inside was stale, heavy with a musty odor that spoke of profound neglect and long abandonment. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind me, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the oppressive stillness. I whirled around, my heart leaping into my throat. Through the grimy windows, I could just make out my car outside, a beacon of hope, tantalizingly close, yet impossibly far away. "Who's there?" I demanded, trying desperately to keep the tremor out of my voice. "This isn't funny. I'm just here to deliver food. A low chuckle echoed through the vast, empty house, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Oh, but it is funny, a voice said, low and amused, a chilling, silky whisper. It's hilarious how easy it was to lure you in. My blood ran cold. This was a trap, and I, like an idiot, had walked right into it. I lunged for the door, but the handle wouldn't budge. Locked. I pounded on the solid wood, screaming for help, but I knew it was useless. There was no one around for miles. Now, the voice chided, closer this time, there's no need for that. We're going to have so much fun together. Lights flickered to life around me, temporarily blinding me in their sudden glare. As my eyes adjusted, I saw that I was in a large foyer. The walls were covered in old, faded wallpaper, peeling in patches like sunburned skin, and a grand, sweeping staircase led up into a second floor shrouded in deeper shadows. But what truly caught my attention, making my stomach churn, were the objects scattered haphazardly around the room. Various phones, wallets, car keys, personal belongings that clearly didn't belong here, glinting eerily in the harsh light. What is this? I whispered, horrified, the chilling realization dawning on me. What have you done? The voice laughed again, a dry, rustling sound like dead leaves. What have I done? I've created the perfect game, of course. And you, my dear delivery driver, are the newest player. A door to my left swung open with a soft sigh, revealing a long, dark hallway lined with more closed doors. The rules are simple, the voice continued, its tone shifting to one of almost playful menace. Make it through my little maze, and you're free to go. Fail. And well, let's just say you'll be joining my permanent collection. I clutched the bag of pizza to my chest like a fragile shield. And if I refuse to play, I asked, my voice barely a tremor. Then you'll starve in this foyer. Your choice. I looked around frantically, searching for any other way out, but the windows were all barred, the front door securely locked. The long, dark hallway seemed to be my only option. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, I stepped forward into the terrifying unknown. The first few rooms I encountered were relatively benign, almost deceptively so. One was filled with countless mirrors, disorienting and unsettling, but not immediately dangerous. Another contained a complex puzzle involving gears and levers. I managed to solve it after several tense, sweat-inducing minutes, unlocking the next door. But as I progressed deeper into the house, the game took a darker, more sinister turn. I entered a room that looked like a perfectly normal bedroom until I noticed the entire floor was covered in an intricate pattern of pressure plates. One wrong step, and who knows what horrifying mechanism it might trigger. I inched my way across, testing each spot with the tip of my foot before committing my full weight. Just as I reached the other side, I heard a chilling click. A hidden panel in the wall slid open with a hiss, revealing a small screen. On it was a live, grainy feed of my car outside. Oops, the voice said, feigning innocence. A sickeningly sweet tone. Did I forget to mention the time limit? For every room you complete, your car gets a little modification. To my horror, I watched as a mechanical arm, grotesque and insect-like, extended from somewhere off-screen and, with a sickening rip, slashed one of my tires. You bastard! I yelled at the unseen speaker, my voice cracking with impotent rage. What do you want from me? Want? The voice echoed, a mocking laugh in its tone. I don't want anything. This is all just for my amusement. Now keep moving, or the next thing to go might be your engine. Fury and raw fear warred inside me as I pushed on, my body aching, my mind racing. The next room was pitch black, an oppressive, suffocating void, and I had to navigate entirely by touch alone. Something soft and scuttling skittered across my bare feet, and I bit back a scream, rats or worse. Each new challenge tested me in new and terrifying ways, a room filled with swinging blades that I had to time my way through with agonizing precision, another where the floor gradually tilted. threatening to dump me into a seemingly bottomless pit of something I couldn't see but could hear bubbling ominously below. All the while, the disembodied voice taunted me, sometimes offering deceptive hints, other times lying outright about what awaited me. I couldn't trust anything I heard, could only rely on my own dwindling instincts and desperate will to survive. I lost all track of time as I made my way through the twisted labyrinth. Minutes, hours, and eternity, any could have passed. My clothes were torn, my body bruised and battered, but I kept going, driven by the primal, desperate need to escape this living nightmare. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I reached a door that looked different from the others. It was made of heavy, reinforced metal, with a complex locking mechanism, glowing faintly in the dim light. "Congratulations," the voice said, sounding genuinely impressed, a chilling sincerity in its tone. "You've made it to the final challenge. Get through this door, and you win your freedom." I approached cautiously, my heart pounding, examining the intricate lock. It seemed to require a numerical code of some kind. "Of course, I can't make it too easy," the voice continued, a hint of playful cruelty in its tone. "You'll have to figure out the code yourself. Here's a hint, the answer has been with you all along." I frowned, my mind racing, desperately sifting through every detail of my horrifying journey. What could that mean? I patted my pockets, looking for anything, any clue that might help. Then my hand brushed against the insulated bag of food I'd been clutching this whole time. The pizza. The food, of course. With trembling fingers, I opened the bag. Inside, beneath the still warm pizza, was the receipt, and prominently displayed on it was the order number. I punched the digits into the keypad, my breath caught in my throat. Holding it for a long, agonizing moment, nothing happened. Then, with a low hiss of hydraulics, the heavy metal door swung open, revealing the blessed cool night air beyond. I could have cried with sheer relief. Beyond the door, I could see my car, battered and scarred, but still drivable. I took a step forward, then hesitated. "Why?" I asked, not really expecting an answer, my voice raw and hoarse. "Why do all this?" The voice chuckled, one last time, a dry, amused sound that echoed in the empty house. "Why does anyone do anything?" "For the thrill, my dear. For the game. And you played beautifully." I didn't wait to hear more. I ran to my car, fumbling with the keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely insert the key into the ignition. I peeled out of the driveway, gravel spitting behind me. I glanced in my rearview mirror. The house stood silent and dark once more, its windows like empty eyes, as if nothing had happened at all. But I knew the truth. Somewhere in there, a twisted mind was already planning the next game, waiting for another unsuspecting victim to fall into their trap. I drove straight to the nearest police station, my hands still shaking violently as I recounted my unbelievable story. They were skeptical at first, their faces a mixture of disbelief and polite concern, but the state of my car, the slashed tire, the damaged engine, and my own battered, traumatized appearance lent a grim credence to my tale. They never found the house. The address I'd been given led to nothing but an empty lot overgrown with weeds, a gaping, forgotten space where a nightmare had stood. No trace of the horror I'd endured. I quit my delivery job the very next day. Some risks, I realized, just aren't worth taking, no matter how good the tips might be. Now, when my phone pings with a notification, a sudden, jarring sound, I can't help but flinch, wondering with a cold dread if it's another invitation to a game I never ever want to play again. Story 7. The moment I saw him stumble out of the dense woods, a primal alarm blared in my mind. His clothes were ragged, plastered with mud and leaves, his face gaunt and wild-eyed like a creature hunted to the brink of collapse. "Please," he croaked, his voice a dry, rasping whisper, "I've been lost for days. Every instinct screamed at me to trust that initial gut feeling and simply walk away, to turn and flee into the safety of the untouched wilderness. Instead, I offered to help. It wasn't until we were deep in the forest, surrounded by an oppressive, unfamiliar silence, that the horrifying realization truly struck me. I had made a terrible, irreversible mistake, and by then, it was already too late. I, Liam, have always loved hiking. There's something profound about the solitude of the trail, the raw, untamed connection with nature that acts as a powerful balm for my restless mind. Is where I feel most at peace, most myself. So, when I had a few days off work, I decided to tackle a new, challenging trail deep in the Redwood Mountains. It was supposed to be a grueling but rewarding hike, culminating in breathtaking views from the summit. The first day went smoothly. I made excellent time setting up my camp as the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in fiery hues. I fell asleep to the comforting symphony of crickets and the gentle, rhythmic rustle of leaves in the cool breeze. The next morning, I packed up early, eager to reach the summit. The trail grew steeper, winding relentlessly through dense, ancient forest, the colossal trees towering over me like silent sentinels. I was so focused on watching my footing, navigating the treacherous roots and loose stones, that I almost missed the subtle fork in the path. I paused, pulling out my worn map. The trail should have been straightforward from here, a clear, unbroken line, but this sudden split wasn't marked anywhere. I was debating which way to go when I heard it. A faint, almost ghostly call for help, carried on the gentle wind. My heart instantly quickened its pace as I scanned the thick trees, my senses on high alert. There it was again, closer this time, clearer. "Hello," I called out, my voice cutting through the silence. "Is someone there?" Silence. Then, a distinct rustling in the underbrush just beyond a thicket of ferns. A man emerged from between two massive pines, looking, to put it mildly, like he'd been dragged through hell and back. His clothes were torn and caked with mud, hanging loosely off his thin, emaciated frame. A scraggly, unkempt beard covered his hollow cheeks, and his eyes, wide and darting, scanned his surroundings nervously. When he saw me, a flood of desperate relief washed over his face, transforming it for a moment. "Oh, thank God," he said, his voice hoarse, raw, barely more than a whisper. "I thought I was going to die out here." I approached cautiously, my instincts warring fiercely between the deep-seated urge to help this clearly distressed person and the primal need to maintain a safe, wary distance. "Are you okay? What happened?" He took a shaky step forward, swaying precariously, nearly collapsing. I rushed to support him, my reservations momentarily forgotten in the face of his obvious distress. "I've been lost for days," he explained between ragged, gasping breaths. "My group, we got separated. I've been trying to find my way back, but everything looks the same." I helped him sit on a nearby fallen log, offering him water from my canteen. He gulped it down greedily, the water disappearing as if into a bottomless well. "I'm Liam," I said, offering my hand. "What's your name?" "Tom," he replied, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand, his eyes still wide. "I can't tell you how glad I am to see another person." As Tom recounted his ordeal, a chilling knot of suspicion began to form in my gut, even as my compassion fought to override it. On one hand, I couldn't just leave him here. He was clearly in no shape to make it out on his own. On the other, something about his story didn't quite add up. How had he survived for days with no supplies? And why hadn't I heard about any missing hikers in the area? A detail usually broadcast far and wide by park rangers? But looking at his desperate, pleading face, I pushed my doubts aside. "Okay," I said, making a decision I would soon deeply regret. "I've got a map. Why don't we try to figure out where your group might be, and I'll help you find them." The gratitude in Tom's eyes was almost overwhelming, almost too much, too effusive. "You do that? Thank you so much." I spread the map out on the ground, the paper crinkling softly. Tom leaned in close, his finger tracing possible routes with surprising agility. As he did, I caught a whiff of something off, not just the expected, earthy odor of someone who'd been lost in the woods for days, but something sharper, almost chemical, acrid. I shook it off, attributing it to my heightened senses, focusing on the task at hand. If we backtrack to this junction, I suggested, pointing to a cross-section on the map, we might be able to pick up your group's trail. Tom nodded eagerly, his eyes glinting in the dim light filtering through the canopy. Yes, that sounds good. Lead the way. We set off. Tom leaning heavily on me for support, his steps initially unsteady. The going was slow, painstakingly so, and I found myself growing increasingly uneasy with each quiet mile. The forest seemed different somehow, the shadows deeper, more oppressive, the silence more menacing, like a held breath before a scream. As we walked, Tom's demeanor began to subtly change. His steps became steadier, surer, his voice stronger, losing its earlier hoarseness. He began to ask questions about my life, my job, whether anyone was expecting me back soon. Each seemingly innocuous question sent a tiny, icy shiver down my spine. So, he said casually, his voice almost too light, "You're out here all alone? No one knows exactly where you are?" I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice level, to project an air of calm confidence. "My roommate knows my general route. I'm supposed to check in tonight." Tom nodded, but I saw something flash in his eyes, a fleeting expression that looked a lot like disappointment, quickly masked. We continued deeper into the trail, which grew narrower and less defined, almost disappearing in places. I was starting to strongly suspect we'd veered wildly off course, but every time I suggested checking the map again, Tom insisted we were going the right way. "It's just up ahead," he kept saying, his voice gaining a chilling edge of insistence. I recognized this area, but nothing looked familiar to me anymore. The ancient trees pressed in closer, their gnarled branches seeming to reach out like skeletal fingers, grasping at me. I couldn't shake the pervasive, terrifying feeling that we were walking, blindly, into a trap. Finally, I'd had enough. I stopped abruptly, digging my heels in, causing Tom to stumble slightly behind me. "This isn't right," I said firmly, my voice gaining strength from my fear. "We need to turn back." Tom's face darkened, instantly shifting, all pretense of weakness, of helplessness, completely gone. "No," he growled, a feral sound. "We keep going." My blood ran cold, a horrifying, crushing realization hitting me with the force of a physical blow. This man wasn't lost. He wasn't looking for help. He was a predator, cunning and patient. And I was his prey. I took a desperate step back, my hand instinctively reaching for the small, foldable pocket knife tucked into a side compartment of my backpack. "I'm going back," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, to project a defiance I didn't feel. "You're welcome to come with me, but I'm not going any further into these woods." Tom's lips curled into a sneer, a truly ugly, inhuman expression. "Oh, I don't think so," he said, his hand disappearing into his tattered jacket. The chilling glint of metal made my heart stop. "A gun. You see," he continued, his voice eerily calm, almost conversational again. "I've been waiting for someone like you, someone helpful, trusting, alone." My mind raced, a frantic, desperate search for a way out. I was lost, far from the main trail, deep in an unforgiving wilderness with an armed mad ant blocking my only path. Panic threatened to overwhelm me, a suffocating wave, but I forced it down, a cold, hard resolve solidifying. I couldn't afford to lose focus now. "What do you want?" I asked, playing for time, my voice barely a whisper, as I slowly, almost imperceptibly, shifted my weight, preparing to run. Tom's grin widened, revealing teeth that were too sharp, too feral, like a wild animal's. "Want? Oh, I want a lot of things. Your supplies, for starters. Your silence. And maybe a little company. It gets lonely out here, you know. The implication in his words made my stomach churn, a sickening, acidic burn. I knew then that I couldn't let him take me. Whatever happened, I had to get away. Okay, I said, raising my hands in a pleading, subservient gesture. Okay, you can have my supplies. Just let me go. Please. I took a small step to the side, as if to remove my backpack, the movement designed to draw his gaze. Tom's eyes followed the movement, his gun lowering just a fraction, a crucial, life-saving fraction. It was now or never. With every ounce of strength I had left, with a desperate, primal surge, I hurled my heavy backpack directly at his face. The weighted pack caught him completely off guard, hitting him squarely, sending him stumbling backward with a surprised grunt of pain. I didn't wait to see if he'd fall. I turned and ran. The forest blurred around me as I sprinted, branches whipping at my face and arms, leaving stinging welts. I could hear Tom crashing through the underbrush behind me, his shouts now a torrent of obscenities. A gunshot rang out, deafening in the enclosed space, the bullet splintering bark inches from my head. I ran like I'd never run before, my lungs burning raw, my legs pumping furiously, fueled by pure, desperate terror. I had no idea where I was going, no plan beyond putting as much distance as possible between myself and Tom. The sound of pursuit grew fainter, thank God, but I didn't slow down. I couldn't risk him catching up. I ran until my legs gave out completely, sending me tumbling head over heels down a steep, rocky embankment. I lay there at the bottom, gasping for air, every muscle screaming in protest as the adrenaline, the body's cruel trick, slowly faded, leaving me with only the crushing, cold reality of what had just happened. I curled into a tight ball, shaking uncontrollably, every nerve screaming. I don't know how long I stayed there, lost in a haze of terror, but eventually, the will to survive forced me to move. I was lost, without supplies, deep in a forest with a dangerous predator. I had to find help, using the faint glow of the sun, now a distant, bruised purple. To orient myself, I started walking, a slow, painful shuffle. Each subtle sound, each rustle, made me flinch, imagining Tom lurking behind every tree, his feral grin waiting. But slowly, mercifully, I began to recognize faint landmarks, a uniquely twisted oak, a distinct rock formation. I was getting closer to the main trail. As night finally fell, thick and oppressive, I saw lights in the distant gloom, a faint, shimmering beacon of hope. The ranger station. I broke into a desperate, final run, relief flooding through me. So overwhelming it almost brought me to my knees. I burst through the door, startling the lone ranger on duty, his eyes wide with surprise. "Please," I gasped, my voice raw, broken. "You have to help me. There's a man in the woods. He's dangerous." The rangers immediately called the local police, and I recounted my harrowing, unbelievable story, the words tumbling out in a rush of fear and adrenaline. They organized a search party, combing the darkened woods, but they never found Tom. It was like he'd simply vanished into the vast, indifferent forest, swallowed by its silence. In the days and weeks that followed, I struggled desperately to come to terms with what had happened. The police, digging deeper, discovered that several hikers had indeed gone missing in those very woods over the years. How long had Tom been out there, a phantom menace, hunting unsuspecting victims, using their kindness against them? I still hike, sometimes, but never, ever alone. The forest doesn't feel like a sanctuary anymore, not like it used to. Now, when I look into the deep, dark depths of the woods, I can't help but wonder what might be lurking there, unseen, waiting patiently for its next target. And sometimes, on quiet, lonely nights, I swear I can hear a voice, carried on the chilling wind. Please, it calls, a mournful, desperate cry. I've been lost for days, but I know better now. I know that sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones that look like they need our help the most. Story 8. The first faint knock was so subtle, I genuinely thought I'd imagined it. A phantom echo in the quiet of the night. The second, however, made me sit bolt upright in bed, my heart instantly racing. By the third, a cold dread had begun to curl in my stomach because the knocking wasn't coming from my hotel room door. It was coming from inside the walls of the supposedly empty room next door. And as I, Alex, would soon horrifyingly discover, some vacancies are far better left unfilled. I never thought a routine business trip could transform into a living nightmare. As a junior software sales representative, I'm accustomed to the sterile sameness of generic hotel rooms across the country, each one blurring into the next. This particular stay, however, was in a small, forgettable town I'd never even heard of before, at a hotel that had clearly seen better days, decades ago. But hey, I'd rationalize it's just for one night. What could possibly go wrong? The moment I stepped into the dimly lit lobby, I sensed something was off. The air was heavy, almost oppressive, thick with a stale, forgotten scent. The flickering fluorescent lights, casting a sickly yellow glow through strange, dancing shadows across the faded, stained carpets. The clerk at the front desk, a gaunt man with an unnervingly pale complexion, barely looked up as I approached, his fingers tapping away at an ancient, humming computer. Checking in, I said, sliding my ID and credit card across the chipped laminate counter. Reservation for Alex Mercer. The clerk's eyes, a surprisingly intense shade of blue, flicked to me for a fleeting second, then immediately back to his screen. Room 237, he mumbled, pushing a heavy, magnetic key card towards me. Elevators to your left. Enjoy your stay. I wanted to ask about nearby restaurants, or if the Wi-Fi actually worked, but something in his flat, almost lifeless demeanor made me hold my tongue. I grabbed my single bag and headed for the elevator, eager to just get to my room and unwind from the long drive. The hallway on the second floor was even more dimly lit, a tunnel of faded glory. The wallpaper, a once grand floral pattern, was peeling in places like sunburnt skin. Room 237 was near the very end, sandwiched ominously between 235 and 239. As I approached, I noticed a Do Not Disturb sign hanging askew on the doorknob of 235. Room 239's door was slightly ajar, a sliver of deeper darkness. But when I glanced inside, all I saw was an impenetrable void. My own room, 237, was adequate, a bit musty, certainly, with furnishings that had clearly seen better decades, but clean enough. I set my laptop up on the small, scarred desk and tried, futilely, to connect to the Wi-Fi, but the signal was frustratingly weak, stubbornly refusing to connect. With a sigh of defeat, I gave up, deciding to call it an early night. My big presentation wasn't until 10 a.m. the next day, so at least I'd be well rested. I must have dozed off quickly, my exhaustion overriding the lingering unease, because the next thing I knew, I was jolted violently awake by a sound. At first, I couldn't quite place it. A soft, dull thump, then silence. I blinked in the oppressive darkness, my eyes slowly adjusting to the faint, eerie glow of the digital alarm clock on the nightstand. 2:17 a.m. There it was again. A knock, but not from my door. It seemed to be coming, unmistakably, from the wall I shared with room 235. I sat up abruptly, instantly wide awake, every nerve screaming. It could be nothing, I told myself, trying to rationalize the chilling sound away. Just another guest getting in late, maybe a bit drunk, fumbling. But as I listened, straining my ears in the suffocating silence, the knocking continued. It wasn't the sound of someone simply knocking on a door, though. It was muffled, heavy, almost trapped, like someone was pounding from inside the wall itself. A bone-chilling dread snaked its way down my spine. This wasn't right. I slid out of bed, my bare feet silent on the thin, worn carpet as I approached the shared wall. The knocking had stopped, but now I could hear something else. A faint, incessant scratching sound, like long nails dragging slowly, deliberately across the other side of the drywall. "Hello," I called out. My voice barely a whisper, feeling utterly foolish even as a cold sweat broke out on my forehead. "Is someone there?" Silence. A heavy, pregnant silence. Then, so quietly I almost missed it, a single raspy word, "Help me." My blood ran cold, a glacial torrent through my veins. The voice was small, faint, almost childlike, but there was something profoundly wrong about it. Something that made every hair on my body stand on end, prickling with primal fear. I backed away from the wall, stumbling slightly, my mind racing. Should I call the front desk? The police? What would I even say? "There's a voice in the wall, officer?" Before I could decide, the knocking started again, louder this time, more insistent, a frantic, desperate rhythm. It was coming from different parts of the wall now, as if whatever was in there was moving around, scrambling, desperate to get out. I fumbled for my phone, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold it steady as I dialed the front desk. It rang once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th ring, someone picked up. "Front desk." Aboard. Flat voice answered, the sound jarringly normal. "This is room 237, I said, trying desperately to keep my voice steady, betraying none of the absolute terror seizing me. "I think there's someone in the room next door. In the walls. I can hear knocking and—" "Sir." The voice cut me off suddenly, sharp and unyielding. "Room 235 is vacant. Has been for months. You must be mistaken. But I heard good night, sir." The line went dead with a click. I stared at my phone in disbelief, my heart hammering. What the hell was going on? The knocking had stopped again, but the silence now was almost worse, a heavy, malevolent presence. I could feel eyes on me, watching from somewhere I couldn't see. From the unseen void beyond the wall. I needed to get out of there. Now, I started throwing my things into my bag, not bothering to be quiet, shoving clothes haphazardly, the sound echoing loudly in the oppressive quiet. As I zipped it closed, a new sound, chillingly distinct, froze me in place. The doorknob to room 235 was slowly, deliberately turning. I watched, paralyzed as the "Do Not Disturb" sign hanging on it swung gently, a macabre pendulum. The door creaked open, just a crack at first, then wider, revealing a yawning, impenetrable darkness beyond. Something moved in that darkness. A shape, vaguely human, but profoundly wrong somehow. Too tall, too thin. Its movements were jerky, unnatural, like a puppet whose strings were being pulled by an inexperienced, cruel hand. I didn't wait to see more. I grabbed my bag, clutching it like a lifeline, and ran. I didn't even bother to close my own door behind me. The elevator, I knew, would be too slow, too risky. I darted for the emergency stairwell, taking the concrete steps 2 at a time. My heart pounding a frantic drum in my ears. The lobby was eerily empty when I burst through the stairwell door, gasping for air, my lungs burning. The front desk was unmanned. A single, ancient computer screen glowing with a chilling error message, its unblinking light illuminating nothing. I didn't stop to investigate, to wonder where the night clerk had gone. I just ran blindly towards the main glass doors, only to find them locked. Of course, it was after hours. I needed a key card to get out, and mine was sitting uselessly on my desk, 14 floors up, a lifetime away. The stairwell door banged open behind me, the sound deafening in the cavernous lobby. I whirled around, backing up, my spine hitting the cold glass doors. The figure that emerged from the shadows made my blood run colder than it already was. It was Mr. Erickson, the head of HR, but not the kindly, slightly portly middle-aged man I was used to seeing in the hallways. This version of him moved with an unnatural, fluid grace, his head cocked at an odd, disturbing angle, and his eyes. His eyes were completely, utterly black, like empty, weeping sockets in the dim, sickly light of the lobby. Now, he said, his voice a low, rasping parody of his usual jovial tone. No need to run. I just want to talk about your performance review. He took a slow, deliberate step towards me and I saw something glint in his unnaturally long hand, a letter opener. Its slender blade catching the faint light from the flickering fluorescence. You've been working so hard, he continued, taking another step, a predatory smile stretching his features. Staying late. Giving it your all. We appreciate that kind of dedication. In fact, we'd like to offer you a permanent position. The way he uttered the word permanent sent a fresh wave of bone-deep terror through me. I glanced frantically around the lobby, desperate for anything I could use as a weapon. Any sliver of a way out. That's when I spotted it, the security guard's desk phone. If I could just reach it, maybe, just maybe, I could call for help. I feinted to the left, then dove right, making a desperate break for the desk. Mr. Erickson, or whatever monstrous entity was wearing his face, snarled, a guttural, inhuman sound, and lunged for me. I felt the whisper of the blade against my back as I vaulted awkwardly over the desk, my fingers closing around the cold plastic of the phone. Lifting it to my ear, I punched in 911, my trembling fingers barely hitting the correct digits. But instead of a dial tone, instead of the familiar voice of a dispatcher, I heard a sound that made my stomach drop, making me want to vomit. That same rasping, chilling voice, now coming through the receiver itself. We're sorry, the number you were trying to reach is out of service. Please hang up and try again, forever. I dropped the phone like it had burned me, the plastic clattering loudly against the desktop. Mr. Erickson was rounding the desk now, that terrible, fixed smile still plastered on his face. You really should have read the fine print on your contract, he said, his black eyes seeming to expand in the dim light. Once you're part of the Meridian family, you're with us for life. And beyond. As he spoke, I noticed movement behind him in the deeper shadows of the lobby. Shadows detaching themselves from the walls, coalescing, taking shape. I recognized them with growing, soul-crushing horror, my coworkers, my boss, even the nice lady who ran the coffee cart in the lobby. All of them moving with that same unnatural, jerky grace, their eyes completely black and empty. They were closing in, forming a silent, terrifying circle around me. I was trapped. Mr. Erickson raised the letter opener, the blade glinting. Now, about that permanent position. In that moment, with absolutely nowhere left to run, something in me snapped. If this was how it ended, if this was my fate, I wasn't going to go quietly. I grabbed the heavy stapler from the security desk, a solid chunk of metal, and swung it with all my remaining might at the overhead sprinkler directly above us. The pipe burst with a loud crack, sending a powerful cascade of water down on us all. The effect was immediate and horrifying. As the water hit them, my possessed coworkers began to melt, not like normal people getting wet, but like candle wax under a searing flame. Their features ran together, dissolving into grotesque smears, their bodies collapsing in on themselves with sickening squelches. Mr. Erickson screamed, a sound no human throat should ever be able to make, a tortured, unearthly shriek that echoed off the high ceiling. He lunged for me one last time, his long, black fingers reaching, but I ducked under his grasping hands and ran. I didn't stop running until I was blocks away, soaked to the bone, gasping for air, the chill of the water mingling with the cold sweat of fear. When I finally turned back, the towering office building looked perfectly normal. Lights were on in the lobby, and a bleary-eyed security guard, blissfully unaware, was visible through the glass doors. I never went back. I sent an email resignation from a library computer the next day, then left town, severing all ties. I couldn't explain what had happened. Couldn't prove anything. Who would believe me? But I know what I saw, what I experienced. And I know now that some jobs demand far more than just your time and effort. Some want your very soul. So, if you're ever working late, alone in a dark office, and you hear footsteps when there should be none, don't wait to see who it is. Run. Run and don't look back. Because in the corporate world, some deadlines are more final than others. And whatever you do, always read the fine print. Story 9. The moment he offered to help, Jessica, should have simply driven away. My instincts, a low thrumming in my veins, screamed caution. But there I was, stranded on a pitch-black road in the desolate middle of nowhere. My car a cold, dead hulk. And his smile seemed so genuinely kind, so reassuring. It wasn't until I saw the unmistakable glint of metal in his hand, catching the faint glow of my hazard lights, that the horrifying realization truly struck. His real intentions were far more sinister than any roadside assistance. By then, it was almost too late. I've always prided myself on being a careful, meticulous person. I meticulously check my tire pressure before any long trips, keep my gas tank perpetually full, and maintain an active roadside assistance membership. But even the most prepared individuals, I've learned, can find themselves thrust into the most unexpected, terrifying situations. This was supposed to be a simple, uneventful drive to visit my sister in the next state over. I'd made the trip dozens of times before, usually during the safe, bright hours of the day. But work had kept me late, an unexpected deadline, and I stubbornly didn't want to cancel on her. So I set out as the sun was reluctantly setting, painting the sky in bruised purples and reds, figuring I'd arrive just before midnight. The first few hours were blissfully uneventful. Traffic thinned out as I left the city's glow behind, and soon I was cruising down a two-lane highway, flanked on either side by dark, sprawling fields and the occasional silhouetted cluster of trees. The radio kept me company, a comforting murmur of late-night talk shows and familiar old rock songs. I was about halfway to my destination when it happened. A loud, alarming pop, followed by the sickening, rhythmic thump-thump-thump of a rapidly deflating tire. Cursing under my breath, my heart instantly leaping into a frantic gallop, I eased the car onto the narrow, unforgiving shoulder and immediately flicked on my hazard lights, their insistent blinking a desperate plea in the encroaching darkness. The night seemed to press in around me, heavy and suffocating, as I stepped out of the car. The air was cool and still, thick with the scent of damp earth and distant fields, with only the faint, incessant chirping of crickets breaking the oppressive silence. I pulled out my phone, intending to call for help, for reassurance, but the dreaded "no service" icon mocked me from the screen. An unblinking eye of digital despair. Great, just great, I muttered, my voice thin and reedy. I popped the trunk, the latch groaning, and pulled out the spare tire and the clunky jack. I'd changed a tire before, in the bright, comforting light of day, but never in the pitch black on the side of a deserted road. Alone. As I wrestled with the stubbornly tight lug nuts, my hands slick with nervous sweat, I kept glancing up and down the highway. Part of me, the rational part, desperately hoped to see another pair of headlights, a sign of life. Another part, a deeper, more primal fear, dreaded the thought of a stranger stopping. I was so utterly focused on my task, lost in the frustrating struggle, that I didn't hear the truck approach. It wasn't until the sudden, blinding wash of headlights engulfed me that I realized I was no longer alone. The truck, an old, battered model that had clearly seen better days, pulled up slowly behind my car, its engine cutting off with a final shudder. I heard the distinct, metallic creak of a door opening. "Need some help there?" A man's voice called out, surprisingly warm and friendly. I straightened up, my heart pounding against my ribs. A trapped bird. In the dim, flickering light from my hazards, I could make out a figure approaching. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a faded flannel shirt and a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes, obscuring his face. "I'm okay," I said, trying desperately to keep my voice steady, to project an air of calm self-sufficiency. "Just a flat tire. I've got it under control." He chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that, despite its apparent good nature, sent a strange, unsettling shiver down my spine. "Now, don't be silly. It's dangerous for a lady to be out here alone at night. Let me give you a hand." Before I could protest, before I could even formulate a polite refusal, he was beside me, crouching down, his large frame suddenly looming close, examining the tire with surprising focus. I could smell a mix of stale cigarette smoke and something sharper, metallic, like old oil or dried blood. "I'm Jim," he said, flashing me a wide smile that, even in the dimness, didn't quite reach his eyes. "What's your name, darling?" I hesitated, a moment of internal debate. Then, figuring there was no harm in being polite, in being civil, I replied, "Sarah." "Well, Sarah, looks like you're in luck. I'm pretty handy with cars." He reached for the lug wrench, his large, calloused hand brushing, almost caressing, against mine. I pulled back quickly, a jolt of revulsion shooting through me, trying to pass it off as a casual, accidental movement. As Jim worked on the tire, his movements surprisingly efficient, he kept up a steady, unnerving stream of conversation. He asked where I was headed, if I was meeting someone, whether I made this trip often. Each question, seemingly innocent on the surface, felt like a probe, a test, making me more and more uneasy. But I told myself I was being paranoid, overly suspicious, too many true crime podcasts, too many late-night thrillers. "There we go," Jim said finally, standing up and dusting off his hands, his smile still fixed in place. Good as new. Relief, hot and overwhelming, washed over me, momentarily eclipsing my unease. "Thank you so much," I said, genuinely reaching for my purse, intending to offer him something for his trouble. Jim waved me off. "No need for that. But, my truck seems to be acting up. Mind if I take a quick look under your hood? Just want to compare it to mine, see if I can figure out what's wrong." Warning bells, loud and insistent, blared in my head. Why would he need to look at my engine? That makes no sense. But he had just helped me, completely, and I didn't want to seem ungrateful or rude, to offend him. But I suppose that's okay, I said hesitantly, my voice betraying my uncertainty. Jim's smile widened, a thin, almost predatory line, as he moved to the front of my car. I followed, keeping a cautious bit of distance between us, my senses on high alert. He popped the hood, the latch springing with a clunk, and leaned in, obscuring my view of the engine. "Ha!" he muttered, his voice muffled. "That's interesting. What is?" I asked, taking a cautious step closer, trying to see over his shoulder. It happened so fast, a blur of motion, I barely had time to react. Jim whirled around, his body suddenly coiled and menacing, and suddenly there was a knife in his hand. The blade, long and wickedly sharp, caught the faint, flickering light from my headlights, glinting with a cold, malevolent sheen. "Now, Sarah," he said, his voice no longer friendly, stripped bare of all pretense, a cold, flat monotone. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to get in your car, and I'm going to get in with you. We're going to take a little drive, and if you're a good girl, maybe I'll let you go when I'm done." Terror, raw and suffocating, froze me in place. This couldn't be happening. This was the kind of thing you saw in the news, read in headlines, not something that happened in real life. Not to me. Jim took a slow, deliberate step toward me, the knife extended, its tip pointing directly at my chest. "Come on now. Don't make this difficult." In that split second, that excruciating moment, primal survival instinct, sharp and brutal, kicked in. I didn't think. I just acted. I grabbed the hood of my car, the cold metal biting into my fingertips, and slammed it down as hard as I possibly could. Jim yelled in pain and surprise as the heavy metal struck his arm with a sickening thud. The knife clattered loudly to the gravel. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I bolted for the driver's side door, fumbling frantically with my keys. I could hear Jim cursing, a string of enraged obscenities, his heavy footsteps thudding rapidly as he came around the car. My hands were shaking so badly, convulsing with adrenaline, I could barely get the key into the ignition, missing the slot repeatedly. Just as I heard his hand reaching, grasping for the door handle, the engine roared to life with a miraculous cough and sputter. I slammed the car into drive and floored it. The tires shrieked, spitting gravel as I peeled away, leaving Jim in a cloud of dust and exhaust, a receding figure of rage in my rearview mirror. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe, a frantic drum against my ribs. I kept expecting to see headlights in my rearview mirror, Jim's truck in hot pursuit, but the road behind me remained mercifully dark and empty. I drove for what felt like hours, my knuckles white, clamped tightly on the steering wheel, every shadow on the dark, deserted road now transformed into a potential threat. When I finally saw signs for a town, a faint cluster of distant lights, I nearly cried with overwhelming relief. I pulled into the first well-lit gas station I saw, its bright, fluorescent glow a beacon of safety, and immediately called the police. They took my statement, their faces grim, and sent out patrols to look for Jim, but I knew with a chilling certainty it was unlikely they'd find him. The highway was long and dark, with plenty of places for someone, a phantom of the night, to disappear without a trace. As I sat in the harsh, unflattering fluorescent light of the gas station, waiting for my sister to come pick me up, the full, crushing weight of what had almost happened hit me like a tidal wave. I broke down, sobbing uncontrollably, racking sobs that shook my entire body. The kind-faced cashier, a woman with weary but sympathetic eyes, brought me a steaming cup of coffee and a sad, knowing smile, like she'd seen this kind of raw, desperate terror many times before. In the days and weeks that followed, I struggled desperately to come to terms with the incident, the lingering trauma a dark shadow over my life. I jumped at every unexpected sound, flinched violently when strangers got too close. I couldn't bring myself to drive at night. The darkness of the road now a terrifying void, and even daytime trips filled me with a deep, pervasive anxiety. But slowly, painstakingly, with the unwavering help of therapy and the constant, loving support from my family, I started to heal. I learned that what happened wasn't my fault, that trusting people isn't a weakness, but that it's okay, more than okay, to listen to your primal instinct when something feels undeniably off. I still make the drive to visit my sister, a familiar pilgrimage, but now I always go during the day. The sun a comforting presence. I keep my car doors meticulously locked, and I don't stop for anyone, no matter how desperate their plea. Some might call it paranoia, a lingering neurosis. But I call it survival. Because the truth is, there are predators out there, lurking in the shadows, people who see kindness as an opportunity to exploit, who prey on those in vulnerable situations. But there are also good people, people who genuinely want to help, who offer a hand without ulterior motive. The trick, I've learned, is learning to tell the difference. To trust your gut when it screams that something isn't right. To be prepared, but not to let fear rule your life. I'll never truly know what might have happened if I hadn't slammed that hood down. If I'd been a second slower getting to my car, if luck hadn't intervened. But I do know this, I survived. And in surviving, I became stronger. So, if you ever find yourself on a dark, deserted road, and a stranger offers help, remember my story. Be cautious. Be aware. And above all, trust your instincts. Because sometimes, the difference between safety and unimaginable danger is a split-second decision. And in that crucial moment, you have to be ready to fight for your life. Story 10. The moment they walked in, Maya knew something was off. For guys, looking far too alert and purposeful for 3 a.m., spreading out like they owned the place. I've worked enough night shifts at Lou's Convenience to instinctively feel when trouble's brewing, but I never imagined just how bad it would truly get. Or that I'd be fighting for my life before the sun even dared to show its face. I've been working the graveyard shift at Lou's Convenience for about 6 months now. It's not glamorous. Certainly not what I envisioned after college, but it pays the bills and, crucially, lets me take my graphic design classes during the day. Most nights are quiet, almost eerily so, just me. The low hum of the fluorescent lights and the occasional drunk stumbling in for late-night munchies. This particular night, however, started like any other. I came in at 11 p.m., relieving the evening guy, Mike. We chatted for a few minutes about nothing in particular, the local baseball team, the unexpected cold snap, before he headed out, leaving me alone in the brightly lit, yet strangely empty store. The first few hours dragged by as usual. I methodically restocked the coolers, the soft clink of bottles echoing in the quiet. swept the worn floors, and tried desperately to stay awake by chugging lukewarm energy drinks and flipping through a dog-eared magazine I'd read a dozen times before. Around 2:30 a.m., a couple of college kids came in, giggling and clearly buzzed. They loaded up on chips and soda, flirted awkwardly with me from behind their sunglasses, and left with a cheerful wave. I smiled and shook my head, a nostalgic pang, remembering my own college days not so long ago. The store fell silent again, a heavy, expectant quiet, and I found myself glancing at the clock every few minutes, willing it to move faster. Just 3 more hours until the blessed morning shift arrived. At precisely 3:07 a.m., I remember checking the time just moments before the bell above the door chimed, a surprisingly cheerful sound that grated on my nerves. I looked up, expecting another harmless drunk or maybe an early morning trucker in need of coffee. Instead, I saw them, 4 guys, all in their 20s or early 30s, dressed in dark, nondescript clothes. They didn't stumble in laughing or head straight for the snacks or even glance at the tabloids. No, they moved with purpose and almost military precision, spreading out through the store with an unsettling efficiency that immediately set off blaring alarm bells in my head. I straightened up behind the counter, my hand instinctively, almost unconsciously, moving towards the silent alarm button hidden underneath. "Can I help you gentlemen find anything?" I called out, trying desperately to keep my voice steady, to project an air of calm authority. The tallest one, a guy with a nose that looked like it had been broken more than once, glanced my way, his eyes sharp and calculating. "Nah, we're good," he said, his tone deceptively casual. "Just browse." I nodded, keeping my face neutral, a blank mask, even as my heart began to race, a frantic drum against my ribs. Something was very, very wrong here. The men continued to move through the store, not really looking at the merchandise, not truly browse, but seemingly checking out every corner, every potential exit. One of them lingered near the security camera in the back, his gaze flicking unervingly between the lens and me. I wanted to hit the alarm, to scream for help, but fear kept me rooted in place, paralyzed. What if they saw me do it? What if it just made things worse, escalated the situation beyond control? After what felt like an eternity, an agonizing stretch of minutes that was probably only a few, the men converged at the counter. The tall one, clearly the leader, stepped forward, all pretense of casualness gone, replaced by a cold, hard menace. "All right," he said, his voice low and guttural, "here's how this is going to go. You're going to open that register and give us everything in it. Then, you're going to show us where the safe is. Do that, and maybe we all walk out of here happy. Understand?" My mouth went dry, suddenly tasting like ash. This was really happening. I was being robbed. "Look," I said, my voice shaking despite my best efforts to control it. "Just take what you want and go. I don't want any trouble." The leader's face hardened, his jaw clenching. "I don't think you're listening, sweetheart. Open the register." I nodded quickly, my head bobbing, turning to the ancient cash register with trembling hands. As I punched in the code to open it, my mind frantically tried to recall the brief, inadequate training we'd had for situations like this. Stay calm. Don't be a hero. Give them what they want. The drawer popped open with a loud, anachronistic ding that seemed to echo in the tense, suffocating silence. I started pulling out bills, acutely aware of the 4 pairs of cold, unblinking eyes watching my every move. "That's it?" one of the other men said, his voice a sneer, as I placed the meager stack of cash on the counter. "There's got to be more than that. It's all we keep in the register overnight," I explained, hating how small, how pathetic my voice sounded. "The rest is in the safe, but I don't have the code for that. Only the manager does." The leader's eyes narrowed, sharp and dangerous, like a predatory animal's. "You expect me to believe that? A place like this, you've got to have more cash on hand." "I'm telling you the truth," I insisted. fear making my words tumble out in a desperate rush. We make drops throughout the night. There's no more money here. For a moment, no one moved, the air crackling with unspoken tension. Then, faster than I could react, faster than my terror-dulled mind could process, the leader reached across the counter and grabbed my arm, his grip like iron, yanking me forward violently. "Listen here," he growled, his face inches from mine, his breath hot and foul. "I'm not playing games. You're going to open that safe, or things are going to get real ugly real fast. Got it?" I could smell alcohol on his breath, a sickeningly sweet odor, and see the wild, unhinged look in his eyes. This wasn't just a robbery anymore. This was a powder keg ready to explode at any second. "I can't," I whispered, tears stinging my eyes, blurring his menacing face. "I swear I don't know the code." The grip on my arm tightened painfully, grinding bone. I saw the leader nod subtly to one of his friends, who moved behind the counter with frightening, silent speed. "Last chance," the leader said, his voice a low snarl. "Open the safe, or Robbie here is going to show you what happens to people who don't cooperate." Time seemed to slow down, stretching into an agonizing eternity. I saw Robbie's hand move to his waistband, saw the chilling glint of metal as he pulled out a knife, its blade wickedly sharp. In that horrifying moment, I knew with absolute, chilling certainty that if I didn't do something, anything, I wasn't gonna make it out of this alive. Without thinking, driven by a raw, primal surge of adrenaline, I grabbed the pot of hot coffee sitting on the counter behind me and, with a desperate scream, flung it directly at the leader's face. He shrieked, a sound of pure agony, letting go of my arm and staggering backward, his face instantly red and blistering. In the chaotic, blinding confusion that followed, I dove for the silent alarm, my hands slamming down on the hidden button before Robbie, momentarily stunned, could stop me. "You stupid bitch," the leader roared, his voice thick with pain and rage. "You're dead." What happened next was a blur of frenzied violence and pure, unadulterated terror. I remember Robbie lunging at me with a knife, its blade flashing. I remember kicking and scratching and fighting with every ounce of strength I had, a desperate, flailing defense. I remember the shattering sound of breaking glass as displays were knocked over in the violent scuffle, candy bars and magazines scattering across the floor. And then, miraculously, a distant sound. Sirens. The men froze, looking at each other in wide-eyed panic. "Cops," one of them yelled, his voice hoarse with fear. "We got to go." They ran for the door, shoving each other in their desperate haste to escape. The leader paused at the exit, turning back to fix me with a glare of pure, unadulterated hatred. His face still streaked with the angry red of burns. "This isn't over," he snarled, a chilling promise. And then he was gone, leaving me alone in the wreckage of the store. I sank to the floor, my whole body shaking uncontrollably, every muscle trembling. I was alive. Somehow, impossibly, I was alive. The police arrived moments later, bursting through the door with guns drawn, their flashlights sweeping the chaotic scene. I must have looked a sight. Bruised, bleeding, covered in sticky coffee and surrounded by broken glass. But in that moment, in their uniforms, with their stern, authoritative faces, they were the most beautiful, most comforting thing I had ever seen. The next few hours passed in a blur of questions and statements. The police took my detailed description of the men, dusted for fingerprints, reviewed the security footage that had captured everything. They told me I was brave, that I'd done the right thing, that my quick thinking had saved not only my life but potentially theirs too. But as I sat in the back of an ambulance, a shock blanket wrapped tightly around my shivering shoulders, all I could think about was how close I'd come to dying, how easily this night could have ended differently. In the days and weeks that followed, I struggled to come to terms with what had happened. I jumped at every sudden noise, flinched when strangers got too close, my nerves frayed and raw. I couldn't bring myself to work another night shift, the thought alone making my stomach churn. Or even to walk into a convenience store without a wave of nausea. But slowly, painstakingly, with the unwavering help of therapy and the constant support from my family, I started to heal. I learned that surviving wasn't just about luck, it was about fighting back, about refusing to be a victim, about finding a strength I never knew I possessed. They caught the men eventually. Turns out they'd been on a robbery spree across 3 states, a string of increasingly violent crimes. When I identified them in a lineup, my hands steady, my voice firm, I felt a surge of cold pride. I had stood up to them. I had won. I still have nightmares sometimes, vivid flashes of a glinting knife and a raging face, and I still find myself checking over my shoulder more often than I'd like. A lingering habit, but I'm not afraid anymore. I'm stronger now, more aware, more prepared. Because the truth is, danger can find you anywhere, even in the most mundane, seemingly safe places. A quiet night at a convenience store can turn into a desperate fight for survival in the blink of an eye. But I learned that night that we're all capable of more than we know. That when pushed to the brink, we can find a strength we never even knew existed. The strength of a survivor. So if you ever find yourself facing your worst nightmare, remember this. You're stronger than you think. Fight back. Survive. And know that on the other side of that terror, you'll find a version of yourself you never knew existed. A survivor. Story 11. The first night. I, Chloe, dismissed the soft thumps and creaks as the old house simply settling. By the third night, a cold certainty had solidified in my gut. Something or someone was outside, watching the house, watching me, and as I peered through the heavy curtains into the oppressive darkness, a bone-chilling realization dawned. This house-sitting gig, meant to be an easy escape, might very well be the last job I ever take. It was supposed to be an effortless way to pad my meager savings, a welcome boost to my struggling artist's budget. My college roommate's parents were embarking on a month-long European vacation, a lavish trip, and they desperately needed someone trustworthy to look after their sprawling suburban home. The job description was simple enough. Water the exotic plants, collect the mail, that sort of mundane thing. Plus, and this was the real draw, I'd have the entire place to myself, a luxurious welcome change from my cramped, perpetually noisy studio apartment. The first few days were absolute bliss. I'd spend my mornings working on my graphic novel, enjoying the profound peace and quiet of the upscale neighborhood. In the afternoons, I'd lazily swim laps in the sparkling backyard pool, the cool water a soothing embrace, or binge-watch shows on their massive cinematic TV. It felt less like a job and more like a private vacation of my own. But then on the 4th night, the idyllic calm shattered. I was up late, around 2 a.m., hunched over my laptop, immersed in a particularly tricky chapter of my book. The house was utterly silent, save for the gentle, almost imperceptible hum of the central air conditioning. That's when I heard it, a soft, almost ethereal crunch of gravel from the long driveway. At first, I thought nothing of it, probably a neighbor getting home late or a lost car turning around in the dead of night. But then I heard it again, closer this time, distinct and deliberate. Like someone was slowly, carefully walking up the drive. I set my laptop aside, the screen casting an eerie blue glow on my face, and moved stealthily to the window, carefully peering out through a narrow gap in the heavy curtains. The street was cloaked in darkness, lit only by a few widely spaced street lamps, their light struggling to pierce the gloom. I couldn't see anyone, nothing but shadows and the shimmering leaves of the ancient trees. Yet, the feeling of being watched, of unseen eyes piercing the darkness, was overwhelming. A cold weight on my chest. Just as I was about to turn away, convinced it was just my overactive imagination, a subtle movement caught my eye. A shadow, detaching itself from the deeper darkness near the tall hedge. It was there for just a fleeting moment, a distinctly human shape, before melting back into the impenetrable night. My heart began to race. a frantic drum against my ribs. I immediately double-checked all the doors and windows, making sure every lock, every latch was securely fastened. As I made my way back upstairs, each creaking step echoing loudly in the oppressive quiet, I couldn't shake the chilling feeling of unseen eyes boring into my back. The next morning, in the harsh, unforgiving light of day, I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it all, a potent cocktail of lack of sleep and an overactive writer's imagination, a truly dangerous combination. But then, as I stepped outside to water the plants, I saw them, fresh footprints in the dewy grass, leading unmistakably right up to the living room window. Deep, clear impressions in the dew. I called the police, of course. They arrived promptly, 2 young officers, took a detailed report, and promised to keep a watchful eye on the place. But I could tell, from their polite but dismissive smiles, that they weren't taking it too seriously. No actual crime had been committed. After all, just a spooked house sitter and some footprints that could have been made by anyone. Their words, meant to reassure, only fueled my gnawing anxiety. That night, I was on edge. Every nerve screaming. Every creak of the old house, every gentle rustle of leaves outside sent my nerves jangling, making me jump. I tried to focus on my writing, but the words wouldn't come, dissolving into meaningless shapes on the screen. Instead, I found myself constantly getting up, compelled to check the windows, peering out into the suffocating darkness, searching for what I dreaded to find. Around midnight, I heard it again. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, circling the house, closer this time. I crept downstairs, my phone clutched in one hand, its screen glowing faintly, and a heavy metal flashlight, cold and comforting, in the other. The footsteps stopped near the back patio door, just outside. My hand shook uncontrollably as I reached for the curtain. Do I really want to see what's out there? A voice of pure terror whispered in my mind. But I had to know. I yanked the curtain back, flicking on the powerful flashlight beam at the same instant. The blinding light cut through the darkness, illuminating nothing. The patio was empty, gleaming wetly from the lingering dew. I let out a shaky, trembling breath, feeling foolish and, paradoxically, intensely relieved at the same time. But as I turned to go back upstairs, a small, chilling detail on the glass of the patio door caught my eye. Pressed unmistakably against it, stark against the dark pane, was a perfect handprint. Not a smudge, not a smear, but a clear, precise impression, as if someone had been leaning there, their palm flattened against the glass, watching me, just moments ago, through the window. Sleep was utterly impossible after that. I sat rigidly in the living room, every light in the house blazing, jumping at every sound, every shadow. When dawn finally broke, painting the sky in pale, washed-out hues, I was exhausted, terrified, and utterly disoriented. I spent that entire day in a daze, alternating wildly between being convinced I was overreacting, a victim of my own imagination, and being certain I was in grave, imminent danger. I thought about leaving, about simply abandoning the house and fleeing back to the false security of my cramped apartment. But I'd promised to look after the house, and part of me, the stubborn, defiant part that had gotten me through countless all-nighters and impenetrable writer's blocks, flatly refused to be chased away by an unseen phantom. As night fell again, a heavy velvet cloak, I prepared myself. I turned on every single light in the house, flooding the rooms with an artificial, defiant brightness. I positioned myself strategically in the living room, choosing a spot with clear, unobstructed views of both the front and back of the sprawling house. My phone, a lifeline, was clutched firmly in my hand, the police on speed dial, and my car keys were within immediate reach, a promise of escape. Hours crawled by, each minute stretching into an eternity. The quiet of the neighborhood seemed oppressive now, heavy and expectant, like a held breath waiting to be explosively released. I was beginning to think that maybe, just maybe, it was over, that my tormentor had given up. Then I saw it. A figure, dark and fluid, darting between the houses across the street. My breath caught in my throat, a painful gasp. As I watched it move with eerie purpose, its trajectory unmistakable directly towards this house. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers feeling thick and clumsy with terror as I tried to dial 911. But before I could even hit call, a rock, sharp and heavy, came sailing through the front window, shattering the oppressive silence along with the glass. I screamed, a raw, primal sound, dropping to the floor as jagged shards of glass rained down around me, tinkling against the hardwood. Through the new, gaping opening, I could hear quick, hurried footsteps approaching the house, accompanied by heavy breathing. Panic, blinding and absolute, gave me a surge of unnatural speed I didn't know I possessed. I scrambled to my feet and ran for the back door, not daring to look behind me. I could clearly hear someone in the house now, their heavy, ragged breathing and hurried footsteps spurring me on, a horrifying counterpoint to my own frantic flight. I burst out onto the patio, sprinting across the backyard towards the sturdy wooden fence. I could see my car, a distant, reassuring shape, parked on the street beyond, tantalizingly close. If I could just make it there. A hand, large and brutally strong, grabbed my arm, yanking me backward with bruising force. I spun around, stumbling, coming face to face with my pursuer for the very first time. He was younger than I expected, perhaps in his early 20s, but his eyes were cold and utterly empty, devoid of any human emotion, like vacant black pits. As he stared at me, a slow, chilling smile spread across his face, stretching his lips in a grotesque parody of amusement. "Why?" I gasped, struggling against his iron grip, trying to break free. "Why are you doing this? Why not?" he said, his voice eerily calm, soft, almost conversational. "It's fun." In that terrifying moment, a truth more horrifying than any monster solidified in my mind. There was no reasoning with him, no pleading, no talking my way out of this. This wasn't about robbery or revenge, or any rational motive. This was about the thrill of the hunt, and I was the prey. Adrenaline surged through me again, a pure, white-hot burst of power. I brought my knee up hard, a desperate, clumsy move, catching him squarely in the groin. He doubled over with a sharp grunt of pain, his grip loosening just enough for me to wrench free. I ran like I'd never run before, vaulting awkwardly over the fence, my bare feet slapping against the cold pavement as I sprinted towards my car. I could hear him recovering, his angry shouts, now laced with pain, spurring me to move even faster. My hands shook violently as I tried to unlock the car door, fumbling with the key fob, dropping it, picking it up again. Come on, I whimpered, a desperate plea. I could hear his heavy footsteps pounding on the pavement behind me, gaining rapidly. Finally, miraculously, the door opened with a soft click. I dove inside, slamming the door shut and hitting the lock button just as he reached the car. He pounded on the window, his face contorted with pure, unadulterated rage. I jammed the key into the ignition, silently praying to any deity that might be listening as I turned it. The engine roared to life, a beautiful, life-saving sound, and I floored it, not caring about direction, just needing to get away. In my rearview mirror, I saw him standing in the middle of the street, a dark, motionless figure, watching me drive away. Even from a distance, I could clearly see that terrifying smile, still fixed on his face. I drove straight to the police station, my hands shaking so badly I could barely keep the wheel straight. This time, they took me seriously. They sent officers to the house, a grim parade of flashing lights, and put out an APB on the guy. But they never caught him. The house was a mess, drawers emptied, furniture overturned, a chaotic scene of pointless destruction, but there was no trace of the intruder, no fingerprints, no clues. It was like he'd simply vanished into thin air. I couldn't go back there after that. I called my roommate's parents, explained through choked sobs what had happened. They were understanding, thankfully, more concerned with my safety than their material possessions. In the weeks that followed, I jumped at every shadow, flinched at every unexpected noise. I couldn't shake the pervasive, terrifying feeling of being watched even in the supposed safety of my own apartment. Slowly though, painstakingly, I started to heal. I threw myself into my writing, using it as a raw, therapeutic way to process what had happened. The graphic novel I'd been working on took a dark, unexpected turn, evolving into a chilling thriller that poured all my lingering fear and anger onto the page. I still house sit occasionally, but never alone, and never without thoroughly vetting the neighborhood first, doing my own background checks. I've installed top-of-the-line security systems in my apartment, a network of cameras and alarms, and I never go anywhere without being acutely aware of my surroundings, my senses always on high alert. Because the truth is, danger can find you anywhere, even in the supposedly safe, manicured suburbs. The monsters aren't always obvious. Sometimes, they wear a calm smile and hunt for fun. But I refuse to let fear control my life, to define me. I'm stronger now, more cautious, yes, but also more confident in my ability to handle whatever comes my way. So, if you ever find yourself alone in a strange house, hearing noises in the dead of night, remember this: trust your instincts. Don't dismiss your fears as mere paranoia. And most importantly, be prepared to fight like hell if you have to. Because in the end, the difference between victim and survivor might just be the willingness to do whatever it takes to see another dawn. Story 12. The first thing I noticed was the absolute silence. Not the gentle symphony of birdsong or the comforting rustle of leaves, but an eerie, profound stillness that made my skin crawl. Then I saw the tent, its fabric torn and stained with what looked horribly, unmistakably like blood. As I approached the abandoned campsite, a twig snapped somewhere in the dense forest behind me. And in that chilling instant, a growing terror seized me. I wasn't alone in these woods, and whoever was out there was playing a game I never, ever agreed to join. I, Julian, have always loved camping. There's something deeply restorative about the solitude of nature, the raw, untamed connection to the wilderness that helps me reset and recharge. So, when I had a long weekend coming up, I decided to head out to my favorite spot, a secluded area deep in the Blackwood National Forest. It was off the main trails, a place where I could truly get away from it all. The first day was perfect. I hiked in, enjoying the crisp autumn air and the satisfying crunch of fallen leaves under my boots. By late afternoon, I had my camp meticulously set up in a small, hidden clearing near a babbling stream. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in fiery hues, I got a fire going and settled in with a well-worn book, feeling completely at peace. That night, I slept soundly, lulled by the gentle, rhythmic sounds of the forest around me. I woke at dawn, eager to explore the surrounding wilderness and maybe even catch some fish for breakfast. But first, I decided to check the snares I had set up the previous evening. I'm not usually one for trapping, but I liked the idea of truly living off the land for a few days. The first 2 snares were empty, which wasn't unusual, but as I approached the third, a sudden, icy chill ran down my spine, a sensation that had nothing to do with the morning air. There, suspended from the wire where I had hoped to find a rabbit, was a small, crudely made rag doll. It was old and dirty, with mismatched button eyes and tangled yarn for hair. Someone had tied the snare carefully around its neck as if it had wandered into the trap on its own. I stood there, staring at the doll, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. This couldn't be happening. I was miles from any marked trail, deep in an area I was certain no one else knew about. How could this be here? With shaking hands, I untied the doll from the snare. As I did, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Carved into the doll's worn wooden back was a crude, unsettling symbol, a circle with an X through it. I dropped the doll like it had burned me, stumbling backward, my heart hammering against my ribs. I frantically scanned the woods around me, suddenly feeling exposed and terrifyingly vulnerable. Was someone watching me right now? I hurried back to my campsite, my eyes darting nervously from tree to tree, searching for any sign of movement. When I reached the clearing, I stopped short, a gasp catching in my throat. My tent had been opened, the flaps swaying gently in the morning breeze. I approached cautiously, my hand instinctively reaching for the small knife on my belt. With trembling fingers, I pulled back the flap. Everything inside had been meticulously rearranged. My sleeping bag was neatly rolled, my backpack placed at the foot of it, and there, on top of the sleeping bag, was another doll. This one was newer, its painted smile mocking me as I stared at it in disbelief. Carved into its chest was the exact same chilling symbol. Panic, cold, and absolute set in then. I grabbed my backpack, not bothering to pack up the rest of my gear. I needed to get out of there. To get back to civilization, to safety. As I turned to leave, something else caught my eye. There, on a tree at the very edge of the clearing, was the symbol again, freshly carved into the bark. The wood was still light where it had been exposed, a stark, terrifying message. My breath caught in my throat. Whoever had done this was close, maybe even watching me right now. I ran. I crashed blindly through the underbrush, no longer caring about stealth or leaving no trace. Branches whipped at my face and arms, but I barely felt them. All I could focus on was putting as much distance as humanly possible between myself and that haunted campsite. After what felt like hours, though it was probably only minutes, I had to stop to catch my breath. I leaned against a massive, gnarled oak, my chest heaving as I tried desperately to calm my racing heart. That's when I saw it, another symbol, freshly carved into the very tree I was leaning on. I jerked away, spinning around wildly, my knife now clutched in front of me, a useless defense. The symbols were everywhere now, on every tree surrounding me. How had I not noticed them before? A twig snapped somewhere in the oppressive darkness behind me. I whirled around, my knife out, trembling. "Who's there?" I called out, hating how my voice shook, how desperate it sounded. "This isn't funny." Silence. Just the rustling of leaves in the wind, a sinister whisper, and my own ragged, frantic breathing. Then a whisper, so faint I almost thought I'd imagined it, carried on the chilling breeze. "Come play with us." I ran again, a wild, desperate flight, no longer caring about direction or where I was going. I just knew I had to get away, had to escape whatever nightmare was chasing me. The forest seemed to close in around me, the trees pressing closer, their branches reaching out like gnarled, grasping fingers trying to grab me. I could hear movement all around me now, rustling in the undergrowth, the snap of twigs, and chillingly, whispered laughter that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I burst into another clearing and skidded to a terrified stop. My blood turned to ice in my veins. Dolls, dozens of them, hanging from the branches of every tree, suspended like grotesque ornaments. Their lifeless button eyes all seemed to be staring at me, their stitched mouths curved in eerie, unsettling smiles. And on every single one, that damned symbol, stark and undeniable. In the center of the clearing, a silent, menacing sentinel, stood a figure, tall and impossibly thin, dressed in ragged clothes that might once have been a park ranger's uniform. But where its head should have been, there was only a burlap sack, crudely stitched to look like a rudimentary, terrifying face. The symbol was painted on its chest in what looked horribly, sickeningly like dried blood. The figure slowly raised its arm, pointing directly at me with a hand that seemed too long, its fingers unnaturally bent and distorted. "Tag," it rasped, its voice a horrific sound like rustling leaves and creaking wood. "You're it." Something in me snapped. With a raw, guttural scream that tore at my throat, I turned and ran back the way I had come. I could hear it behind me, its footsteps unnaturally fast, twigs and leaves crunching with disturbing speed under its pursuit. I ran like I had never run before in my life, my lungs burning, raw, my legs aching, every muscle screaming in protest. I had no idea where I was going, no plan beyond escaping whatever nightmare was chasing me. Suddenly, miraculously, the trees thinned out. I burst out of the forest onto a road, an actual paved road. In the distance, I could see a car approaching, its headlights cutting through the oppressive darkness. I waved my arms frantically, screaming for help, my voice a desperate, broken sob. The car slowed, then stopped. An older couple peered out at me, their faces a mix of profound concern and visible fear. "Please," I gasped, my voice cracking with desperation, "please help me. There's something in the woods. It's after me." They ushered me into the car without hesitation, the woman wrapping a comforting blanket around my shivering shoulders as her husband sped away. As we drove, I glanced back at the forest, a dark, hungry maw. For a moment, I thought I saw figures standing at the tree line, tall and impossibly thin, watching us drive away. But when I blinked, they were gone. The couple took me to the nearest ranger station, where I told my unbelievable story through chattering teeth. The rangers looked skeptical, their faces a polite mask of doubt, but agreed to check it out. They found my campsite, my abandoned gear still there, scattered and untouched. But there were no dolls, no strange carvings, no sign of the clearing full of hanging horrors. They chalked it up to an animal attack, maybe a bear, combined with the sheer terror of being lost in the woods at night. Part of me wanted to believe them, to embrace the comforting lie that it had all been some vivid hallucination, a stress-induced fever dream. But I know what I saw, what I felt. The terror was too real, the danger too palpable to have been a mere trick of the mind. The inhuman grace of those figures, the glowing eyes, the impossible speed of their pursuit. It wasn't natural. It wasn't of this world. I don't go camping anymore. Can't even bring myself to walk in the local park surrounded by cheerful dog walkers and children playing. Because now, I know that there are things in the woods that can't be explained, entities that turn nature itself into a twisted playground for their amusement. And sometimes, when I'm alone at night, the silence thick and heavy, I swear I can still hear a whisper on the wind, "Come play with us." But I won't. I escaped their game once. I'm not foolish enough to think I'd be so lucky a second time. So, if you ever find yourself deep in the forest, and you come across a doll where it shouldn't be, or see strange symbols carved into the trees, don't dismiss it. Don't try to rationalize it away. Run. Run as fast and as far as you can. And pray that you're faster than whatever's chasing you. Because in some games, being it is a fate far worse than death. Story 13. The first footstep echoed through the empty office like a gunshot. I, Samuel, froze, my fingers hovering over the keyboard, suddenly acutely aware of how utterly alone I was. It was well past midnight, and I knew for a fact that everyone else had gone home hours ago, leaving only the hum of the building. So who or what was walking around in the impenetrable darkness beyond my cubicle? I hadn't planned on staying so late. As a junior copywriter at Meridian Advertising, I was used to putting in extra hours, the relentless churn of corporate deadlines. But usually I was home by 9, maybe 10 p.m. at the latest. Tonight, though, I had a major pitch due in the morning, a make-or-break presentation for a new client, and the words just weren't flowing, stubbornly refusing to coalesce into coherent sentences. So I kept at it, telling myself I'd leave after just one more paragraph, then one more page. Before I knew it, the cleaning crew had come and gone, their muffled carts echoing faintly. The overhead lights automatically dimmed to their eerie nighttime setting, and still, I sat there, bathed in the anemic glow of my computer screen, trying desperately to find the perfect, catchy phrase to sell overpriced sneakers to jaded teenagers. It was precisely 12:37 a.m. when I heard that first footstep. I held my breath, straining my ears in the suffocating silence. For a long moment, there was nothing but the soft, omnipresent hum of the air conditioning system. Then, another step, and another, slow, deliberate footfalls, coming unmistakably from the direction of the elevator bank, echoing eerily in the vast, empty floor. My mind raced, desperately cycling through the possibilities. A late-night worker, like myself? Unlikely. I would have heard the distinct ding of the elevator arrive. Security? They usually stuck to the lobby unless doing their rounds, and those weren't scheduled until 2 a.m. A break-in? The thought sent a jolt of ice through my spine. Our office was on the 14th floor of a supposedly secure building. How would someone even get up here undetected? The footsteps were closer now, moving steadily, inexorably in my direction. I realized with growing horror that my cubicle was the only one still lit in the entire sprawling office. Whoever was out there could see exactly where I was, a beacon in the darkness, while I was completely blind to their approach. I needed to move, to hide, to do something. But a paralyzing fear had me rooted to my chair, my breath coming in short, silent gasps. The footsteps stopped, just on the other side of my cubicle wall. I could hear breathing now. Slow and unnaturally even, almost a soft hiss. A shadow, long and distorted, fell across my desk, stretching like an ominous finger. With a desperate surge of adrenaline, I lunged for my cell phone. A lifeline to the outside world, but in my haste, I knocked it off the desk. It clattered loudly to the floor, the sound deafening in the otherwise absolute silence of the office. The shadow moved. A hand, long and skeletal, appeared at the edge of my cubicle, its unnaturally long fingers curling around the fabric partition, grasping. I watched, paralyzed, as a figure began to slowly lean into view. In that horrifying moment, primal survival instinct kicked in, raw and brutal. I didn't think. I just acted. I grabbed my heavy stapler, a solid, metallic chunk of office equipment, and hurled it with all my might at the approaching figure. There was a satisfying thunk as it connected, followed by a sharp grunt of pain. I didn't wait to see more. I bolted from my chair, sending it crashing backward, running blindly into the bewildering maze of cubicles behind me. I could hear angry, guttural muttering, and the distinct, rapid sound of pursuit. The office was a different, terrifying world in the dark. Familiar paths became treacherous obstacle courses. I stumbled over hidden chairs, banged my hip painfully on a desk corner, nearly clotheslined myself on a stray power cord. I made for the emergency stairwell, my footsteps thundering loudly in the enclosed space as I took the concrete stairs 2 at a time, each step a desperate plea for escape. Above me, I could hear the stairwell door slam open again, the heavy sound echoing. My pursuer was following, relentlessly. 14 flights of stairs stretched endlessly before me, an agonizing ascent. My lungs burned, raw and screaming for air. My legs felt like lead, protesting every desperate stride, but pure, unadulterated terror kept me moving. The footsteps above were getting closer, unnervingly fast. Whoever it was, they were quicker, stronger than me. I burst out of the stairwell on the ground floor, gasping for air, the cold, stale lobby air filling my aching lungs. The lobby was dimly lit, cast in an oppressive gloom. The security desk was ominously empty, its screens dark. Where was everyone? I ran for the main doors, my hand reaching for the cold metal only to find them locked. Of course, it was after hours. I needed a key card to get out, and mine was sitting uselessly on my desk, 14 floors up, a lifetime away. The stairwell door banged open behind me again, the sound deafening. I whirled around, backing up until my back hit the cold, unyielding glass doors of the lobby. The figure that emerged from the deeper shadows of the stairwell made my blood run colder than it already was. It was Mr. Erickson, the head of HR, but not the kindly, slightly portly middle-aged man I was used to seeing in the hallways, always with a mild, reassuring smile. This version of him moved with an unnatural, fluid grace, his head cocked at an odd, disturbing angle, and his eyes were completely, utterly black, like empty, weeping sockets in the dim, sickly fluorescent light. Now, he said, his voice a low, rasping parody of his usual jovial tone. stripped bare of all warmth. No need to run. I just want to talk about your performance review. He took a slow, deliberate step towards me, and I saw something glint in his unnaturally long hand. A letter opener, its slender, sharp blade catching the faint light. "You've been working so hard," he continued, taking another step, his predatory smile stretching his features. "Staying late, giving it your all. We appreciate that kind of dedication. In fact, we'd like to offer you a permanent position." The way he uttered the word permanent sent fresh shivers down my spine, a wave of bone-deep terror. I glanced frantically around the lobby, my eyes darting, searching for anything I could use as a weapon, any sliver of a way out. That's when I spotted it. The security guard's desk phone, sitting innocently on the counter. If I could just reach it, maybe, just maybe, I could call for help. I feinted to the left, then dove right, making a desperate break for the desk. Mr. Erickson, or whatever monstrous entity was wearing his face, snarled, a guttural, inhuman sound, and lunged for me. I felt the chilling whisper of the blade against my back as I vaulted clumsily over the desk, my fingers closing around the cold plastic of the phone. Lifting it to my ear, my hands shaking violently, I punched in 911. But instead of a dial tone, instead of the familiar voice of a dispatcher, I heard a sound that made my stomach drop, making me want to vomit. That same rasping, chilling voice, now coming through the receiver itself. "We're sorry, the number you are trying to reach is out of service. Please hang up and try again." Forever. I dropped the phone like it had burned me, the plastic clattering loudly against the desktop. Mr. Erickson was rounding the desk now, that terrible, fixed smile still plastered on his face. "You really should have read the fine print on your contract," he said, his black eyes seeming to expand in the dim light. "Once you're part of the Meridian family, you're with us for life and beyond." As he spoke, I noticed movement behind him in the deeper shadows of the lobby. Shadows detaching themselves from the walls, coalescing, taking shape. I recognized them with growing, soul-crushing horror. My coworkers, my boss, even the nice lady who ran the coffee cart in the lobby. All of them moving with that same unnatural, jerky grace. Their eyes completely black and empty. They were closing in, forming a silent, terrifying circle around me. I was trapped. Mr. Erickson raised the letter opener, its blade glinting with a cold, malevolent light. Now, about that permanent position. In that moment, with absolutely nowhere left to run, something in me snapped. If this was how it ended, if this was my fate, I wasn't going to go quietly. I grabbed the heavy stapler from the security desk, a solid chunk of metal, and swung it with all my remaining might at the overhead sprinkler directly above us. The pipe burst with a loud crack, sending a powerful cascade of water down on us all. The effect was immediate and horrifying. As the water hit them, my possessed coworkers began to melt. Not like normal people getting wet, but like candle wax under a searing flame. Their features ran together, dissolving into grotesque smears, their bodies collapsing in on themselves with sickening squelches. Mr. Erickson screamed, a sound no human throat should ever be able to make, a tortured, unearthly shriek that echoed off the high ceiling. He lunged for me one last time, his long, black fingers reaching, but I ducked under his grasping hands and ran. I didn't stop running until I was blocks away, soaked to the bone, gasping for air, the chill of the water mingling with the cold sweat of fear. When I finally turned back, the towering office building looked perfectly normal. Lights were on in the lobby, and a bleary-eyed security guard, blissfully unaware, was visible through the glass doors. I never went back. I sent an email resignation from a library computer the next day, then left town, severing all ties. I couldn't explain what had happened, couldn't prove anything. Who would believe me? But I know what I saw, what I experienced. And I know now that some jobs demand far more than just your time and effort. Some want your very soul. So, if you're ever working late, Alone in a dark office and you hear footsteps when there should be none, don't wait to see who it is. Run. Run and don't look back. Because in the corporate world, some deadlines are more final than others. And whatever you do, always read the fine print. Story 14. The moment I spotted the tiny camera lens glinting from behind the air vent, a cold, sickening dread twisted in my stomach. Sarah, knew instantly I'd made a terrible mistake. This wasn't just a quaint Airbnb in the countryside. It was a trap, and I, with my desperate longing for peace, had walked right into it. I'd been looking forward to this getaway for months. The relentless stress of my demanding job in the city, coupled with a recent, painful breakup, had left me utterly desperate for some genuine peace and quiet. When I stumbled across the listing for a remote cabin rental online, it seemed like a perfectly idyllic escape. The drive out had been long, stretching for hours, but surprisingly therapeutic as I wound my way up narrow mountain roads. The suffocating weight of my daily worries seemed to fall away with each mile. By the time I pulled up to the cabin, nestled in a small clearing surrounded by towering pines, I felt lighter than I had in years. The cabin's owner, a guy named Eric, had left the key in a lockbox by the door. His profile picture showed a friendly-looking man in his 40s with kind eyes and a salt and pepper beard. The reviews were glowing, full of praise for his hospitality and the cabin's cozy charm. As I stepped inside, I had to admit, the reviews didn't do it justice. The interior was all warm wood and soft fabrics, creating an inviting atmosphere, with a massive stone fireplace dominating one wall. Large windows offered stunning, panoramic views of the surrounding ancient forest. It was exactly what I needed, a perfect sanctuary. I spent that first afternoon exploring the property, breathing in the crisp mountain air and feeling the tension in my muscles slowly unwind, melting away with each step. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in fiery hues, I settled in front of the crackling fireplace with a comforting glass of wine and a thick book I'd been meaning to read for months. It wasn't until I was getting ready for bed, the house steeped in quiet, that I noticed something odd. A faint, almost imperceptible red light blinking intermittently from behind the bathroom mirror. I leaned in closer, my heart beginning to race, a frantic drum against my ribs as I realized with a sickening certainty what I was seeing: a camera. My mind reeled. This had to be a mistake, right? Maybe it was part of some elaborate security system I hadn't been told about? But as I frantically searched the rest of the bathroom, my blood ran cold. There, hidden in the shower head, was another camera. Panic, sharp and metallic, rising in my throat. I began a frantic, desperate search of the entire cabin. Behind picture frames, inside lamp bases, tucked into the dark corners of bookshelves. Everywhere I looked, I found more cameras. Some were so meticulously hidden I almost missed them. Others, like the one in the air vent, were glaringly obvious now that I knew what to look for. With shaking hands, I grabbed my phone and called Eric. It rang once, twice, 3 times before going straight to voicemail. I hung up and tried again, my panic growing with each unanswered call. Finally, on the 5th try, he picked up. "Hello?" His voice was groggy, thick with sleep, like I'd woken him from a deep slumber. "Eric?" I said, my voice thin and reedy, barely a whisper. "This is Sarah from the cabin rental. I found cameras. They're everywhere. What's going on?" There was a long, unsettling pause. Then, in a tone that sent a fresh wave of chills down my spine, he said, "I think you're mistaken, Sarah. There are no cameras in the cabin, but I can see them." I retorted, my voice rising in desperation. "They're in the bathroom, the bedroom, even the living room. Why are you lying?" Another pause, heavier, more deliberate. When Eric spoke again, his voice had lost all trace of sleepiness. It was cold, flat, almost amused, like a predator toying with its prey. "I told you, Sarah, there are no cameras. And if you know what's good for you, you'll forget you ever thought you saw any." The line went dead with a click. I stood there, My phone still pressed to my ear, the silence in the cabin suddenly deafening, as the full, horrifying reality of my situation sank in. I was miles from anywhere, deep in an unforgiving wilderness, in a cabin filled with hidden cameras, and the owner knew I had discovered them. I had to get out of there. Now, I grabbed my bag, my fingers fumbling with the strap, and ran for the door, only to find it wouldn't budge. The knob turned freely, but it was like something was blocking it from the outside, an unseen barrier. The windows were the same, sealed shut, impossibly strong despite their rustic appearance, like solid panes of concrete. I was trapped. As panic threatened to overwhelm me, a suffocating fog, I forced myself to think, to regain some semblance of control. Think, Sarah, think. There had to be a way out. I just had to stay calm and figure it out. I went back to the living room, intending to break one of the large windows with a heavy wooden chair, a desperate, last-ditch effort. But as I lifted it, my muscles straining, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The cameras were moving. Their tiny lenses, like malevolent eyes, were following my every move. Someone was watching me. Right now. A soft noise from outside made me freeze. Footsteps on the porch, then the distinct scrape of a key in the lock. I looked around wildly, desperately, searching for a weapon. Anything to defend myself with. The door swung open slowly. Eric stood there, framed against the twilight, but he looked nothing like his friendly profile picture. He was younger, for one thing. His face leaner, harder, and his eyes, there was nothing kind about them now. They were cold, calculating, like a predator eyeing its prey. "Oh, Sarah," he said, shaking his head slowly, as if disappointed by my predictable defiance. "You really should have left well enough alone. Do you have any idea how much those cameras cost?" I backed away, my hand instinctively closing around a heavy bookend on the shelf behind me, its cold metal a small comfort. "What do you want from me?" I demanded, my voice trembling. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him with a soft, ominous click, sealing us in. "Want?" He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Oh, I want a lot of things, but mostly, I want you to understand the situation you're in." As he spoke, I noticed movement outside the windows, more people, at least 3 or 4 shadowy figures circling the cabin. My heart sank. A leaden weight as I realized how thoroughly I'd been trapped, how meticulously this had been planned. "You see," Eric continued, his voice taking on a chillingly theatrical tone. "This isn't just about you. You're part of something much bigger. A show, if you will. And our viewers are very eager to see what happens next. A show. The cameras. The remote location. The fake profile. It all started to make a horrifying, sickening kind of sense. This wasn't just some perverted voyeur. This was organized, planned, professional. "You're insane," I said, trying desperately to keep my voice steady, to project defiance. "People will look for me. The police?" Eric laughed, a dry, brittle sound devoid of any real humor. "The police, Sarah? Sarah. Who do you think signed off on your rental agreement? We have friends in high places. No one's coming to save you." He took a step towards me and I raised the heavy bookend threateningly. A futile gesture. "Stay back. Now," he said, his tone mockingly soothing, as if speaking to a child. "There's no need for that. You have 2 choices here. You can fight, in which case things will get very unpleasant very quickly. Or you can play along, be a good sport, and maybe, just maybe, we'll let you go when we're done." I knew he was lying. Whatever sick game this was, there was no way they'd ever let me walk away from it. But I also knew I couldn't take on Eric and his hidden accomplices alone. I needed time to think, to plan, to find a weakness. So I lowered the bookend, forcing my trembling body to relax, to appear compliant. "What do you want me to do?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Eric's smile widened, and I saw a flash of genuine, twisted pleasure in his eyes. It made my skin crawl. "That's a good girl. For now, just act natural. Pretend you never saw the cameras. We'll give you further instructions as we go. He turned to leave, then paused at the door, his hand on the knob. Oh, and Sarah, don't try to be clever. Remember, we're always watching. As the door closed behind him, the ominous click of the lock echoing in the quiet, I sank to the floor, my mind reeling. How had a simple vacation turned into this unimaginable nightmare? And more importantly, how was I going to get out of it alive? I spent the next few hours in a daze, a horrifying, surreal pantomime, going through the motions of a relaxing evening while my mind raced, frantically searching for an escape. I knew they were watching every move, every expression, so I forced myself to eat dinner, to read my book, to act as if everything was perfectly normal. But all the while, beneath the performance, I was searching desperately for a way out, a weakness in their twisted system. It wasn't until late that night, as I lay in bed, feigning sleep, my heart pounding, that I had an idea. The cameras needed power. If I could find a way to cut it, I might have a chance. I waited until the early hours of the morning, when I hoped my unseen watchers might be less alert, their vigilance dulled by exhaustion. Then, moving as quietly as I could, a phantom in my own nightmare, I made my way to the circuit breaker. It was a huge risk. They might have anticipated this move, might have a backup system, but it was the only plan I had. With a deep, shuddering breath, I flipped the main switch. The cabin plunged into absolute, oppressive darkness. For a moment, there was silence, a heavy, pregnant pause. Then chaos. I heard shouts from outside. Rapid footsteps running towards the cabin. Not waiting to see what would happen, I grabbed my pre-packed bag, a small beacon of hope, and ran for the back door. In the sudden confusion, they hadn't thought to block it again. I burst out into the cool night air and ran. I ran like I'd never run before, my lungs burning, raw, every fiber of my being screaming in protest. Branches whipped at my face, stinging and scratching, but I barely registered the pain. I could hear them behind me, crashing through the underbrush, shouting, but pure, unadulterated fear gave me a burst of speed I didn't know I possessed. I don't know how long I ran. It felt like hours, an eternity, but finally, mercifully, I saw lights ahead, a highway, a promise of salvation. As I stumbled onto the asphalt, a car screeched to a halt beside me. An older couple peered out, their faces etched with concern and alarm. "Please," I gasped, my voice raw and broken, "help me. Someone's after me." They didn't hesitate, their kindness a beacon in the darkness. They just opened the door and ushered me in. As we sped away, I glanced back at the dark, menacing forest. For a moment, I thought I saw figures emerging from the tree, lean, tall and impossibly thin, watching us drive away. But then we turned a corner, and they were gone. I never went to the police. Who would believe such a wild, unbelievable story? And if Eric was telling the truth about having friends in high places, friends who could cover up such horrors, it might only put me in even more danger. Instead, I moved, changed my name, started a new life far away from any remote cabins or too-good-to-be-true vacation rentals. But sometimes, late at night, in the quiet solitude of my new life, I still feel like I'm being watched. And I wonder if somewhere out there, the show is still going on, with a new, unsuspecting star walking blindly into a trap they don't even know exists. So, if you ever book a charming cabin in the woods, remember my story. Look closely at the air vents, the light fixtures, the dark corners of rooms. And if you see something that doesn't belong, run. Run and don't look back. Because in this digital age, you never know who might be watching.